Chapter 37:11. Little brat, where are you from? That's right. There are only 2 corpses of ancient ape demons in the root of all evil, and neither of them are females. Don't try to fool me. You don't belong here. Before Xianxia could say anything, the primordial porcupine and primordial tortoise that he was holding in his hand had questioned him. Even though they weren't reprimanding him, there was still a wisp of fierceness in their tone. This was because Xianxia was indeed a pure-blooded ancient ape demon, and he was holding the head of a region lord from the invader's side in his other hand. Of course, another reason was that the bloodline inheritance of the ancient demon ape was extremely extraordinary. Even in this star field, the source of all evil, it was ranked at the top. As a matter of fact, the Star Lord primordial ape demon in the core of the root of all evil was a close friend of the 2 primordial porcupines and the primordial tortoise. However, it had failed to become a region lord and had died ever since. So both the primordial porcupine and primordial tortoise felt a sense of closeness towards Xianxia, who had suddenly appeared in the form of a 3-headed and 6-armed ancient ape demon. Otherwise, why would they allow him to step on the primordial porcupine's back, hold the region lord primordial tortoise in his hand, and threaten them? In short, when they saw this little devil ape, the primeval porcupine and tortoise recalled their old friend that had fallen while charging into the ranks of region lords all those years ago, and they instinctively took him to be in existence like a junior or a nephew of the younger generation. Even then, since he was an outsider from outside the root of all evil, they had to find out his background in the end. It would be bad if there was a problem. That was why the primordial porcupine and primordial tortoise had asked that question. Actually, they had faintly made a decision in their hearts. If there was no problem with this little ape's origins, then what harm was there in allowing it to stay? I'm from the outer realms, and I was born in a desolate canyon on a star. I followed the guidance of the bloodline in my body to come here. Xianxia slowly understood the situation. In order to become familiar with this group of indigenous ferocious beasts, he had no choice but to pretend to be a charlatan. A holy look appeared on his face as he said that he was following the guidance of the bloodline. Then he added, "This star field gives me a sense of familiarity. I can feel the aura of my blood relatives in the depths ahead." As he spoke, he pointed towards the core of the root of all evil ahead. In any case, it was an indisputable fact that there were the remains of 2 ancient demon apes there. One of them was even tens of thousands of feet long, and it had been dead for an unknown number of years. Who knew if it had left behind any bloodline outside? No one dared to jump to conclusions on this matter. And when Xianxia said that he had sensed the aura of a blood relative, it just happened to fit the facts. Basically, he could get away with it. Who would have thought that the reason Xianxia was able to say such words was because he'd been here in his human form before, and it was even deeper than that. What if he had entered the netherworld cauldron? At that time, there was the intimidating aura of the headless infant corpse, and it just so happened that the Black Bug Queen was looking for a mate. Almost all of the native beasts in this core hinterland hid and didn't dare to show their faces. They didn't want to be targeted by the Black Bug Queen, who was like a crazy woman in heat and suffer a great calamity. Therefore, even though Xianxia had been there before, none of the indigenous ferocious beasts in the core of the root of all evil had seen him. At this moment, the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise were more or less reassured after hearing his words. The last trace of doubt in their eyes was gone. Since he had said that the aura of a blood relative was up ahead, it was basically certain that the little ape was indeed related to the 2 ancient demon apes that had been reduced to corpses. Even if it wasn't an old friend of theirs, it could only be a descendant of the ancient demon ape that was a Star Lord, or a bloodline left behind by another ancient demon ape that was even stronger. Even though that ancient demon ape had perished countless years ago, it had been a corpse since the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise had gained consciousness, and it had lost all signs of life a long time ago. However, even though it was a corpse, they had been living together for so many years, and they'd long since regarded each other as neighbors and companions. Since it was a bloodline descendant of the ancient demon ape that he'd left behind who had followed the guidance of the bloodline in his body to this place, then there was naturally no reason to drive him away. With that thought in mind, the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise immediately released a friendly aura and consoled Xianxia. "Welcome home, little brat. Don't be afraid, those fellows outside won't dare to come in rashly. At most, they'll be hiding in the buffer zone outside. There's no need to pay any attention to them." Even these 2 region lords who were the strongest amongst them had acknowledged Xianxia's identity as one of their own, so the entire army of native ferocious beasts that resided in space in the distance naturally didn't dare to object. The last trace of vigilance in the eyes of all the indigenous ferocious beasts had dispersed, and they'd completely accepted Yi Xian. They'd taken this little devil ape with 3 heads and 6 arms to be their companion. At this point, Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and he was completely at ease. However, even though this group of indigenous ferocious beasts had accepted him, Yi Xian still had to pass through the depths of the core area every single year to obtain fortune from the nether furnace. What if the headless corpse of an infant didn't respond to him? Then he would be utterly unable to pass through that terrifying area that was filled with the pressure of countless primordial beings. So, Yi Xian had to form a good relationship with this group of indigenous ferocious beasts and obtain their trust so that he could find out about their secret technique to avoid the terrifying pressure of the primordial beings. When he thought in this way, he immediately raised his right hand that held the multicolored python's head, and he said in a slightly flattering tone, "Great kings, I presume you're hungry after that fierce battle just now, right? I just happened to cut off a snake's head on the way here, and it should be quite delicious after I roast it. Take it as a meeting gift." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian immediately drew out a strand of the Shunnong dual-colored flames from the farmer god cauldron within his body, and he roasted this region lord's head on the spot. Originally, under the circumstances that he hadn't utilized the farmer god cauldron, Yi Xian was unable to directly draw the Shunnong dual-colored flames from within his body out of his body. However, since the purplish warbler, Duanmu Xiaocha, and Zhao Qianru frequently utilized the Shunnong dual-colored flames, it had advanced into dual-colored flames. The flame's agility had clearly improved as well. Presently, Yi Xian was already able to draw it out of his body with ease. Yet now, as he drew out a strand of the Shunnong dual-colored flames from within his body with a wave of his hand, he roasted that region lord's head on the spot. The primeval porcupine and primeval tortoise were clearly stunned. Chapter 37:12. Where's the fire? Where's the fire just now? Little featherhead, hurry up and get it out. Stinking brat, are you deliberately tantalizing this old man's appetite? I just smelled a little fragrance and extinguished the fire before it was cooked. As the wisp of Shunnong's dual-colored flame was extinguished, the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise became anxious on the spot. The latter jumped onto Yi Xian's head again and dug around between his 3 heads, as if Yi Xian would hide the dual-colored flame that he had just drawn out between the 3 heads. It was as if it was sandwiched between the cracks. This was not the end. The primordial porcupine, which was 100 feet tall, also stretched its huge head over and wanted to rummage through Yi Xian's body. The huge breath made Yi Xian stagger and almost fall to the ground. Only now did he realize that he had misunderstood. Just now, when he suddenly saw the eyes of the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise burst out with a burning green light, Yi Xian thought that the moment he mentioned that he was hungry, these 2 fellows would be interested in him and want to eat him in one bite. After all this time, it turned out that they had seen the extraordinariness of the Shunnong dual-colored flame. They knew that not only was the food roasted by this kind of fire incomparably delicious, but it was also very beneficial to the body. It was simply like the effect of boiling great medicine. That was why their eyes were emitting a green light, and now they were acting so impatient. Realizing this, Yi Xian's eyes instantly lit up. It seemed that this group of native beasts were all a group of foodies. Since they were foodies, then what was the problem? Among all the native beasts, only he had the Shunnong dual-colored flame in his hands. What did this mean? It meant that from now on, he would be able to control the stomachs of these fellows. For a foodie, what could make him submit better than controlling his stomach? With this thought, Yi Xian immediately became spirited. He made up his mind. Not only would he grill a feast of Shunnong unusual flame for these 2 native ferocious beast kings, he would also grill the millions of native ferocious beasts behind them. As long as they could provide him with ingredients, he would draw out a wisp of dual-colored unusual flame and grill them for them. In any case, the dual-colored flame in the Shunnong cauldron was inexhaustible. The exotic flame had its roots in the depths of the volcanoes in the central region of the cauldron. As long as the Shunnong cauldron was not destroyed, the Shunnong exotic flame that had been ignited by Yi Xian's core fire would never run out. In addition, after the purplish warbler, Duanmu Xiaocha, and Zhao Qianru messed around and inadvertently turned the original orange-red flame into the current dual-colored flame, Yi Xian also understood one thing. That was, if he wanted to upgrade the Shunnong heavenly flame, he had to use it frequently. So, helping these native ferocious beasts to grill a feast was absolutely a good thing for Yi Xian. Since it was like that, then why not? Grandpa Pig, Grandpa Turtle, your gazes from before terrified me. Isn't it just grilling meat? I'll be right back. Also, Master Tortoise, can you not climb on top of my head in the future with your original color? Yi Xian calmly changed the way he addressed it, and their relationship became slightly closer. As he spoke, he waved his hand and immediately drew out another strand of dual-colored flames from within the Shenknown cauldron, and he continued grilling it. As he grilled it, he continued. However, this Region Lord Realm Python head isn't really enough. It's only 30 m long, and it's probably only enough to fill the gap between my teeth. Before Yi Xian could finish speaking, the primeval turtle had turned around and vanished with a swish. A few breaths of time later, 2 pieces of the 7-colored python's remains were dragged over by it. The primeval turtle was still around 3 m long, but a few strands of its green hair had extended out and wrapped around the 2 pieces of the python's remains, and it was dragging them over at extreme speed. It was absolutely a perfect portrayal of an ant dragging an elephant, and it stunned Yi Xian. Even more shocking to him was that the 2 pieces of the python's corpse that he was dragging over clearly emanated the terrifying aura of a region lord. The head was over 2 kilometers long while the tail was over 3 kilometers long. It was clearly a multicolored python that was at the region lord realm, yet it had been blasted into pieces by Chen Shi. It had been torn apart. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment before he came to a sudden realization. No wonder that Region Lord Realm Lord of the Rainbow Python clan had fallen to the Star Lord realm in the end. Moreover, his 30 kilometers long body had shrunk to only 300 m long, and Yi Xian had beheaded him with a single strike of his blade. After all this time, his bloodline true body had already severed itself and remained in the depths of this core region. What had escaped was just the pure colored python true body. Since that was the case, the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise would definitely have enough food. Even if the roasted python meat melted in their mouths, the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise wouldn't be able to finish it in one meal. Presumably, the human-shaped talkative monster and the new star lords like the black-armored Mother Empress in the void far away would be able to get a share of the pie too. It's a little too extravagant to eat these 2 big chunks in one meal. I'll leave the 3,000 zhang long chunk for the next meal, Yi Xian pondered in his heart. If he could roast the bloodline true body of a region lord in front of the Second Universe's allied army, it would definitely be a rather awesome thing. He naturally wouldn't let go of such an opportunity. So, he casually found an excuse as he spoke, and with a wave of his hand, he placed the 3,000 zhang long chunk of the python tail into the space within the farmer god cauldron within him. Of course, he directly tossed it into the storage cave at the bottom of the volcano in the central region. Otherwise, it would definitely benefit the purplish warbler, Duanmu Xiaocha, and Zhao Qianru. The might of the farmer god dual-colored flames far surpassed the single-colored orange flames. Not only was the roasted meat even more fragrant and delicious, the miraculous medicinal effects of the roasted meat were even stronger. Even the speed at which it was roasted was extraordinarily swift. While Yi Xian was speaking, the 30 m long head of the python before him had been completely roasted. It was originally 30 m long, but now it had shrunk to around 20 m long, and all the impurities had been removed. At this moment, the entire head was golden and flowed with oil while a strange fragrance drifted through the surroundings. After all, it was the head of a region lord's main body, and it had even just been severed. So, the vital blood essence contained within its flesh and blood was too dense. It wasn't just the primeval porcupine and tortoise that were staring blankly and drooling. It was even to the extent that the myriad of native ferocious beasts in space in the distance had clearly smelled this strange fragrance that assaulted their nostrils, and all of them were staring blankly at the golden python head before Yi Xian. Saliva flowed from their mouths. Needless to say, this scene was extremely magnificent. A myriad of ferocious beasts of various races and sizes were staring at a golden python head that had been roasted, and they were silently drooling in unison. It was obvious how magnificent it was. However, perhaps it was because they considered that this python head was roasted by Yi Xian, but when they noticed that he didn't make a move or make a sound, not to mention those native ferocious beasts in space in the distance, even the nearby primeval porcupine and tortoise didn't hold back at all no matter how much drool flowed from their mouths. After all, they'd taken Yi Xian to be one of their own, so they had to be polite. Chapter 37:13. The primeval porcupine and tortoise didn't pay any attention to the change in the way they addressed Yi Xian. At this moment, all their attention was drawn over by the golden python head that was merely around 20 m long. After all, it was roasted from the head of a region lord realm multicolored python. Even though the primeval porcupine and tortoise were region lords as well, Even they hadn't tasted the flesh of existences at the same level as them, especially when it was roasted well and was even roasted with Shenlong's dual-colored flames. Even though this golden python head was only around 20 m long, it was roasted from the head of a region lord realm multicolored python in the end, and the flesh and blood essence contained within it was extremely dense. Even if it was to the primeval porcupine and tortoise at the same realm of cultivation, it was extremely beneficial to them. Even though they hadn't tasted it yet, they were region lords after all, and they discerned it a long time ago. Actually, the primeval porcupine and tortoise were fine with such a feast, and even the human-form multi-mouthed monsters and the new black-armored mother and the other stellar lord realm experts who were far away in space could eat to their heart's content as well. However, the native ferocious beasts at the universe realm couldn't eat too much, otherwise, it would be too nourishing. It would probably only harm them and not benefit them. As for Xian, it was even more impossible for him to eat as he pleased like he did when roasting such precious flesh and blood. Yes, he'd even roasted the flesh and blood of that golden crow at the World Lord realm. But that was completely different. That golden crow was at the World Lord realm indeed, but it had perished countless years ago in the end. Even though a portion of its vital energy and blood essence still remained within its flesh and blood, and it was even to the extent that its blood hadn't dried up, too much of its flesh and blood essence had been lost imperceptibly, and it had spread throughout the universe outside the corpse. On the other hand, even though this multicolored python was only at the region lord realm, it had just perished. It was even to the extent that it hadn't perished when Xian severed its head with a single strike of his saber, so its flesh and blood essence was still preserved to the greatest extent within its corpse. If it was really mentioned, then the violent energy within the flesh and blood of this region lord realm multicolored python even far surpassed the corpse of that golden crow at the world lord realm that had perished a long time ago. This was also the reason why Xian did not plan to eat too much. As far as he was concerned, eating 100 feet of golden python meat would be his limit. Any more and it would be useless. The violent energy in the python meat would damage the foundation of Xian's fleshly body. Soon after, as Xian spoke, the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise turned to look at each other. Then, the latter leaped up and pounced onto the golden head of the python that was roasted to the point of dripping with oil. The immemorial hairy tortoise's body had shrunk to the size of about 10 feet. It was eating the head of the python that had shrunk to about 70 feet. It didn't plan to swallow such a good thing in one gulp. At this moment, it was lying on its stomach with a happy and intoxicated expression on its face. It planned to slowly savor and enjoy it. As the pieces of boa meat entered his mouth, they melted as soon as they entered his mouth, turning into a pure and warm energy that spread throughout his body. The immemorial hairy turtle's green fur instantly lit up. This was the rhythm of the precious body giving off a bright light. Countless native fierce beasts thousands of miles away looked at it with shining eyes, but none of them dared to come over. The primordial porcupine beside it was already drooling. At this moment, its mouth was even more saliva, and it was almost flowing into a river. However, no matter how much it shrunk, it could only reach its current size of about 1,000 feet. Its bloodline was different, so it couldn't compare to the immemorial hairy tortoise. This python head was only 70 feet long. If the primordial porcupine ate it now, it would probably swallow it in one gulp. Because of this, he negotiated with the immemorial hairy tortoise. The primordial porcupine would eat the python head while the primordial porcupine would wait for the 70,000 feet long giant python bloodline true body. After roasting it, they would eat heartily. In fact, Xian didn't make him wait for long. While the immemorial hairy tortoise was lying on the 70 feet long python head and savoring the delicious food, Xian had already started roasting the 70,000 feet long colorful python bloodline true body. The Shenlong unusual flame could be more or less, big or small. After all, when the Shenlong cauldron transformed into its true form, it was a terrifying cauldron comparable to a giant star. The central region volcano, which took up a third of the space inside the giant cauldron, contained the Shenlong unusual flame. From this, one could imagine how majestic the Shenlong unusual flame was. Previously, when he was roasting the python head that was only 100 feet long, Xian only drew out a small wisp of the dual-colored flame from the Shenlong cauldron. However, now that he was roasting the 70,000 feet long colorful python bloodline true body, he naturally couldn't do the same as before. With a wave of his hand, Xian drew out a two-colored flame that was nearly 3,000 meters in diameter. It carried an extremely strong spirituality, and like a two-colored dragon, it stretched across the air and directly wrapped around the python's true body, roasting it at full speed. This scene was too big. Not only was the entire army of indigenous ferocious beasts thousands of miles away in the void shocked, even the nearby primordial porcupine trembled slightly. When it came back to its senses, it had already narrowed its eyes and quietly sized up Yixian from head to toe. After showing such a skill, there was probably no one in the core hinterland of the root of all evil who would look down on Yixian's little primordial demonic ape who was only 100 feet tall. At least, the dual-colored flame was already extraordinary. Being able to refine a wisp of it in one's body was already an extraordinary fortune. However, Yixian had summoned a fire dragon with a diameter of 1,000 feet with a wave of his hand, and it didn't seem to be his limit. That alone was enough to make people ponder. At that moment, he probably hadn't noticed that the 20 or so Star-Lord level indigenous ferocious beasts leading the charge in the void thousands of miles away were looking at him as if he were a Star-Lord expert of the same level. As for the universe realm indigenous ferocious beasts behind the 20 or so Star-Lords, there was even more fear in their eyes because the dual-colored fire dragon made them feel a strong sense of crisis. Even the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise were looking at him with a lot of solemnity. In just a few minutes, the colorful python bloodline true body was finally completely roasted. All the impurities were removed, and it shrank to a size of 50,000 feet. Such a volume was still extremely terrifying. As it floated in the air, it continuously emitted a strange fragrance that assailed the nostrils. There was even golden oil flowing around it. Even Yixian couldn't hold it in anymore. Oh woo! The primordial porcupine was the first one who couldn't hold it in anymore. It howled in joy and directly jumped over. Its entire body was hanging on the 50,000-foot-long golden python bloodline true body. It squinted its eyes as it ate. Intoxicated. Chapter 37:14. Oh woo! Roar! As soon as Yixian's words fell, the 10 million native beasts in the void immediately flared up. In truth, they didn't expect to get a share of the pie at all. After all, no matter how large the rainbow python's bloodline true form was, it was only a few thousand meters long. If they really wanted to divide it, none of the native beasts would get a single bite. Not to mention, the cultivation bases of many of them were indeed rather low. While this golden feast made from the plump flesh and blood of a recently fallen region lord was indeed delicious, it might not be the best food for them to replenish their energy. However, these native beasts were quite knowledgeable. They had long seen the extraordinariness of the Shenong flames that Yixian had summoned with a wave of his hand. Although there were some native beasts among them who were proficient in fire arts and could roast their own meat, the effects of the Shenong flames weren't inferior. How could they compare to Yixian's Shenong flames? It could be said that after roasting the Shenong flames, even ordinary flesh would have the medicinal effect of a great flesh medicine. It was definitely a continuous improvement in quality. However, Yixian was only one person after all. Moreover, he was only 30 meters tall and seemed to still be in his infancy. How could so many native beasts be shameless enough to pester him to use the Shenong flames to roast their meat? Even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be so shameless as to ask. However, it was different now. This newcomer was very likable. He actually waved his hand and promised that as long as they could find ingredients, they would roast as much as they could. He wouldn't refuse any of them. To these native beasts, there was no better news than this. Therefore, they cheered and jumped for joy. It was as if they were celebrating a festival. All of them roared in excitement to the extreme. After a few howls, almost all of the native beasts charged out. Some turned around and charged into the void behind them, while others charged directly into the core region behind Yixian. The two battles with the Second Universe's army had taken place in these two regions. There were still many remnants of the invaders in these two regions that hadn't been cleaned up yet. These were all ingredients, after all. Of course, there were also a large number of corpses of the origin of all evil, but they obviously wouldn't be dragged over for Yixian to roast. Although they were both space beasts, they couldn't overcome this hurdle in their hearts. Although the native beasts of the root of all evil were of different races, they all treated this region as their home and were very united. They definitely wouldn't eat the remains of their own faction. For example, the remnants of the primordial life forms in the depths of the core region that they had all poured their emotions into. Otherwise, they would have been eaten clean over the years. How could they still be left floating in the void until now? Although there were less than 10 million remnants of the powerhouses of the Second Universe left in these two battlefields, there wasn't much difference. Even if all the native beasts couldn't share a bloodline true body, it was still possible for 2 or 3 of them to share a bloodline true body. As the army of nearly 10 million native beasts dispersed, the void in front of them, which was originally crowded with native beasts, instantly emptied out. There were more than 100 native beasts at the level of Old Monster Qian and Old Monster Starlord, who were rushing toward the 50,000-foot-long golden python meat, along with the primordial porcupine and Old Monster Qian. The primordial porcupine and Old Turtle shared a 50,000-foot-long colorful python bloodline true body. Yi Xian didn't stop. While the 100 or so native beasts at the level of Universe Realm and above were eating together, he was also eating heartily. After a while, he wouldn't have the leisure time. All the remnants of the powerhouses of the second universe on the two battlefields would be dragged over. They would probably be piled up into several small mountains. Even if Yi Xian were to roast them one by one, it would probably take a while. While he still had the leisure time, he had to first swallow the 100-foot-long colorful python meat that he had estimated before. Perhaps he could use the powerful qi and blood essence energy contained in the 100-foot-long colorful python meat to break through one or two minor realms in one fell swoop before the piles of corpses were dragged over. Now, his original body was already at Void Realm level 7. If he broke through two more minor realms, he would reach Void Realm level 9. When he had time later, he would take a tube of level 13 liquid that he had already prepared, and he would be able to advance to the 13th Great Realm, the Primordial Realm. As for the state of the three-headed, six-armed devil ape's true body, Yi Xian was currently at the 7th level of the Cosmic Light Realm. If his original body broke through two small levels, then the cultivation he displayed in the devil ape's true body would most likely rise from the 7th level of the Cosmic Light Realm to the 9th level of the Cosmic Light Realm. He was only one minor realm away from the 15th Great Realm, the Universe Realm. As long as his original body consumed the level 13 liquid and successfully advanced to the 13th Great Realm, the Primordial Realm, then Yi Xian was confident that the cultivation strength he displayed in the devil ape true body state would officially step into the Universe Realm. At that time, he would finally be able to display the battle strength of the 15th Great Realm, the Universe Realm. It would definitely be a completely different scene. At this time, a large piece of roasted golden flesh from the head of a domain lord fell into Yi Xian's mouth. After being vigorously chewed a few times, it instantly turned into a boiling hot stream that flowed down his throat. This pure flesh and blood essence energy was too majestic, and the level of this energy was too high. Even though Yi Xian was currently in his three-headed, six-armed devil ape true body state, he actually felt that every inch of his flesh and blood, every single cell, inside and outside of his body was instantly filled with pain as if they were being torn apart. Although it was said to be painful, there was clearly a kind of incomparable numbness and itchiness. Moreover, he also felt that his entire body was warm, as if his entire body had become much lighter, as if he was about to ascend to immortality. At this moment the 1.08 billion pores on his body were simultaneously spewing out 9 colored auspicious clouds. Vaguely, one could even hear the strange clanking sounds of mysterious chains being shaken. This was the sign that the potential shackles of Yi Xian's physical body were being pulled, and were about to be torn apart. This feeling was both painful and joyful. It was not the first time that Yi Xian had experienced this, and he felt a kind of pain and pleasure that he was familiar with. Although there was a strange phenomenon happening in his body, the movements of his hands did not stop because of this. The 5,000-meter-long piece of golden python meat in front of him was constantly being reduced. At the same time, there were too many foodies eating at the same time. Yi Xian originally thought that his original plan was only to eat about 10 feet of python meat, so there was no need to fight for it. But now it seemed that if he were to imitate the primordial turtle and slowly eat, he would only be able to eat about 40 to 50 feet of python meat in the end. The difference was too big. Yi Xian immediately increased his speed and wolfed down the meat. After an unknown amount of time, Yi Xian's original body, which was the primordial devil ape true body, finally heard the familiar sound of the system's notification in his mind. It made him feel refreshed and excited. Chapter 37:15. The essence contained in the colorful python's meat was too rich. It came from the bloodline true body of a colorful python that had just been cut down. It had also been roasted by the dual-colored flames of the Shenong cauldron, which removed all the impurities, leaving only the essence behind. Yi Xian had only eaten about 8 to 9 meters of python meat when the sound of chains came out from his body. His potential shackles were torn apart several times, and his body was once again refined. His qi and blood realm was raised, and he advanced by 2 small realms. Today, his physical body and qi realm had increased from the previous void rank 7 to the current void rank 9 great perfection. Yi Xian had refined the level 13 liquid in advance and was ready to take it when he had the time. If he succeeded, Yi Xian's qi and blood level would reach the beginning and end domains, which were the 13th major realms. He would be one step closer to the 15th major realm, which was the universe realm. In fact, at the same time that his original body's qi and blood realm improved, the cultivation strength of the three-headed, six-armed demonic ape real body that he was displaying now also improved, and it just so happened that it was also two small realms. In other words, Yi Xian was at the peak of the 9th rank, which was the 14th major realm, when he was in the true form of the three-headed, six-armed demonic ape. He was only one minor realm away from the universe realm. Once Yi Xian took the level 13 liquid and broke through to the Genesis realm, which was the 13th major realm, he would be able to reach the 15th major realm when he was in the true form of the three-headed, six-armed demonic ape. He would become a universe realm expert. Yi Xian was excited when he thought of that. He had finally reached the universe realm. Even though he could only achieve it when he was in the true form of the three-headed, six-armed demonic ape, he would soon be able to feel the power of that realm. While Yi Xian's cultivation had improved, the primordial porcupine, the primordial tortoise, and over 100 Star Lords and universe realm native beasts were still eating heartily. All of them had extremely intoxicated expressions on their faces. Obviously, they really enjoyed such delicious food. No, it wasn't just delicious. All the universe realm experts and Star Lords were emanating auspicious light from their bodies after they'd eaten a large amount of Region Lord realm golden python meat. Even the primeval porcupine and primeval turtle were the same. Even though they were Region Lords as well, the medicinal effects of the multicolored python meat that was roasted by the dual-colored flames of the farmer god cauldron were truly too formidable. It was simply like being refined into a medicinal pill, and even Region Lords like them who were at the same realm of cultivation as them had obtained a great deal of benefits from it. Yi Xian didn't dare to continue eating. His physical body had just been tempered, and his qi blood had advanced by 2 minor realms in one go. He had broken through some of the shackles of his potential, and it was time for him to slowly nourish himself. He should take some precious medicines with gentler effects, such as the Netherworld Furnace Lotion. He shouldn't take such a violent medicine, or it wouldn't be beneficial to his physical body at all. That was why he hadn't taken a tube of level 13 liquid right away to break through to the 13th realm, the Genesis realm. In fact, more than half of the 50,000-meter-long golden python meat had been eaten. After all, there were 2 Region Lords eating it, and they didn't have any scruples. There wouldn't be any hidden dangers no matter how they ate it. In addition, there were over 100 Star Lords and Universe Realm native beasts eating heartily. The remaining golden python meat probably wouldn't last for long and would be gone soon. It was also at this moment that the native beasts below the Universe Realm, who had left in a hubbub, returned one after another. Some of them came alone, some in groups of 3 or 5, dragging the bloodline true bodies of the experts of the Second Universe, which were relatively large. Those guys knew that Yi Xian couldn't roast the meat for them one by one. It would take too long, and he would probably die of exhaustion. Therefore, after all the native beasts dragged the meat they found into the void, they didn't say anything and directly threw it into the void. Then, they obediently retreated into the distance, drooling as they waited quietly. A hill of meat ingredients was slowly formed, followed by a second one. After a while, 5 hills of meat ingredients were piled up in the void. It was quite a spectacular sight. At this moment, almost all the native beasts that had left had returned. Yi Xian didn't hesitate any longer. He waved his hand and summoned an enormous dual-colored flame from the space inside the Shenong cauldron. He started roasting the first hill of meat ingredients. A rich aroma instantly spread out. Under the roasting of the enormous Shenong dual-colored flames, a mountain of meat ingredients quickly turned golden and dripped with oil. This time, the entire core area was filled with a rich aroma. Although the freshly roasted meat wasn't as good as the golden python meat of the Genesis realm, it was the best nourishment for the native beasts who were relatively weak. After all, the Shenong cauldron flames were extraordinary. Even regular meat ingredients could be roasted with them. Some of the native beasts quickly pounced on the food and ate heartily. Yi Xian, however, didn't stop there. He waved his hand, and the enormous Shenong cauldron flame swept out again, covering the second hill of meat ingredients. Just like that, the 5 mountains of meat ingredients were all roasted in less than the time it took to eat a meal. When Yi Xian waved his hand and stored the Shenong dual-colored flames into the Shenong cauldron within his body, The last group of native beasts that had been waiting anxiously all howled as they charged towards the last mountain of golden flesh. This scene was too shocking. As far as the eye could see, there were 5 golden mountains of flesh in the void. The first one was full of native ferocious beasts, and all the ferocious beasts in this corner of the void were eating wantonly. Their bodies were emitting eye-catching multicolored lights, and the intense fragrance in the void was so thick that it almost didn't disperse. It was as if one would be intoxicated with just a deep breath. Not long after, 5 enormous hills of bones were left in the void. Not a single piece of meat could be found on each skeleton. It was as if a dog had licked it clean. Some of the native beasts began to break through on the spot. This time, all of them had benefited, and they looked at Xianxia with gratitude. At the same time, some of them were burning with passion, because some of the gluttonous fellows hadn't had enough and were already looking forward to the next feast. The primordial porcupine, primordial turtle, and the Star-Lord old monsters also stopped. The 50,000 zhong long golden python meat had been reduced to white bones. They completely approved of Xianxia and pulled him into the depths of the core area. However, Xianxia stopped halfway with a frown. The pressure from the bodies of the primordial creatures in the void was too strong, and it made him stop. Chapter 37:16. The Protection of the Netherworld Furnace? Xianxia's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the critical moment had arrived. It was no wonder these native beasts were able to move unhindered through the core of the origin of all evil, practically ignoring the terrifying pressure from the remains of powerful primordial creatures in the void. After all this time, it turned out that they had obtained the protection of that enormous netherworld furnace in the depths of the core. Without a doubt, that mysterious netherworld furnace was definitely a primordial treasure that was no weaker than the farmer god cauldron. It was just that they each had different functions. The farmer god cauldron was primarily used for refining medicine. Of course, it was also used to store items and nurture various medicinal herbs and flesh materials. The cauldron contained a vast space. Around the central region volcano were a series of mountains, where rare medicinal herbs that were hard to find in the outside world were planted. There were also some spiritual birds and spiritual beasts that possessed extraordinary medicinal effects inhabiting the cauldron. However, they had all yet to mature, still in their growth phase. Compared to the farmer god cauldron, the netherworld furnace's effects were more violent. If the farmer god cauldron's effects were more constructive, then the netherworld furnace's effects were more destructive. Inside was an enormous and mysterious millstone of profound power. All the remains of primordial creatures could be thrown into the millstone, where they would be ground into meat paste. The impurities would be removed and the essences would be refined in the end. Of course, the current netherworld furnace might have been adjusted to a higher level of refinement. This was because the refined product was the all-evil origin elixir that was effective for the recovery of primordial experts and even primordial supremes. As a result, it had very high requirements for the raw materials. However, the level of refinement could clearly be adjusted. For example, if the standard of refinement was lowered, the grade of the raw materials that the mysterious millstone could accept would decrease. Similarly, the final product refined would also decrease in grade. It would no longer be the all-evil origin elixir. Instead, it would be a product with a slightly weaker effect. However, no matter how weak it was still a good thing. After all, the grade of the netherworld furnace was still there. Even if the standard of refinement was lowered, the flesh materials thrown into the millstone would not be too bad. In Xianxia's view, the so-called protection of the netherworld furnace might have something to do with this. There was absolutely no need for it to protect these native beasts in the core of the origin of all evil for no reason at all. They would not be affected by the terrifying pressure from the remains of primordial creatures in the surrounding void. According to Xianxia's guess, if nothing unexpected happened, the native beasts that lived in this core area were actually all flesh and blood materials raised by the netherworld furnace. One day in the future, they might be used and thrown into the netherworld furnace to be ground into meat paste to refine some kind of netherworld furnace product. It was the same for the remains of the primordial era creatures around the netherworld cauldron, which it had spat out as unqualified raw materials. In the future, they would all be used together. They would be thrown into the netherworld furnace together with all the native ferocious beasts that lived in this core hinterland. They would be ground into meat paste by that huge mysterious millstone and condensed into some kind of product. When he thought of this, Xianxia immediately felt a chill in his heart. The methods of the Eye of the Heavens were truly extraordinary. It was just too vicious. While it was using the flesh of supreme primordial creatures to refine the all-evil origin elixir, This one had already begun raising the flesh materials needed to refine another product of the netherworld furnace in the future. It was a pity that the primordial porcupines and primordial tortoises, native beasts that had been raised like pigs and sheep, had completely failed to realize this. It was truly lamentable. Little Featherhead, get me a drop of devil ape true blood. You're still under the protection of the netherworld furnace, so you can't cross over. I'll help you do this. Just as Xian was muttering to himself, the immemorial tortoise, whose entire body was filled with forgiveness, climbed onto Xian's head once again and asked for a drop of devil ape true blood. From the sound of it, it seemed that it was going to throw it into the netherworld furnace, similar to registering a household register. From then on, Xian would be protected by the netherworld furnace. Yes. He was able to walk freely in this void without fear of the terrifying pressure emanating from the remains of the powerful primordial beings in the void. Xian sneered inwardly. The netherworld furnace was clearly registering the future flesh materials. He immediately hesitated. He did have devil ape true blood. After all, he had already condensed the devil ape true body. He only needed to squeeze out a drop from the 3-inch devil ape that was suspended above Xian's sea of consciousness, which represented the devil ape true body. That would be the so-called devil ape true blood. But the problem was that the 3-inch devil ape wasn't just obtained from the 9-eyed golden crystal that represented the primordial devil ape bloodline. Xian had also separated a strand of his primordial spirit and fused it with it. Now they had completely fused together, and there was no distinction between them. In other words, if Xian squeezed out a drop of devil ape true blood from the 3-inch devil ape, then this drop of devil ape true blood would more or less contain a strand of Xian's primordial spirit's aura. If that was the case, it was hard to say whether the netherworld furnace would be able to detect any clues. Moreover, this drop of devil ape true blood contained a strand of Xian's primordial spirit's aura. This was something that Xian wasn't too reassured. If the netherworld furnace wanted this drop of devil ape true blood, it wouldn't just be to register the future materials in advance and create a roster. It would also have other uses and purposes. In that case, wouldn't Xian be restrained? The primordial spirit of the primordial spirit was no joke. Even if this drop of devil ape true blood was only an extremely weak strand, Xian didn't dare to be careless with the grade of the netherworld furnace and the work of the primeval heaven's eye. Perhaps this strand of primordial spirit's aura would be enough to scheme against Xian? Just as he was hesitating, Xian's primordial spirit suddenly felt a burning sensation on the left side of the chest of the devil ape's body. That was where the corpse lantern tattoo of the headless infant's corpse was located. However, Xian's primordial spirit was currently in the form of a devil ape. His outer appearance was that of a black ape covered in black fur, so the corpse lantern tattoo couldn't be seen at all. However, the sudden reaction of the headless infant's corpse at this time, could it be because of this drop of devil ape true blood? If the headless infant's corpse took action, Xian naturally wouldn't have to worry about that drop of devil ape true blood. Even if there was a strand of Xian's primordial spirit's aura, it wouldn't be a problem. Perhaps the headless infant's corpse would mix in something else. It was a terrifying existence on the same level as the heaven's eye. With it taking action, how could the netherworld furnace scheme against Xian? Chapter 37:17. Although the left side of Xian's chest was slightly hot, there was no other reaction immediately. However, he could clearly feel that a drop of devil ape blood had condensed in his body. Moreover, it was mixed with a mysterious aura that Xian himself could barely detect. There was no doubt that this was the trick that the headless infant corpse had secretly arranged in this drop of devil ape blood. With it taking action, Xian naturally had nothing to worry about. He immediately waved his hand and summoned this drop of so-called devil ape blood that the headless infant corpse had added something special to, suspending it in the void in front of him. The immemorial turtle immediately flew out and wrapped this drop of devil ape blood with a wisp of aura. Following behind it, it rapidly moved towards the deepest part of the core hinterland of the root of all evil. Xian didn't know how it did it, but it shouldn't be too complicated. If nothing unexpected happened, this drop of devil ape blood should have been directly thrown into the netherworld furnace, and then directly accepted by it. From then on, this 3-headed, 6-armed devil ape blood would also be registered as one of the future flesh materials by the netherworld furnace. However, in the end, who was scheming who, Xian already knew in his heart. Although he still didn't know and couldn't guess what the headless infant corpse's trick was, with the infant corpse's temperament, it would definitely make a big move once it made a move. This time, there was a good show to watch. The only regret was that this good show might have to wait for a while. Obviously, there was no hope for it at present. While muttering to himself, Yi Xian suddenly felt that from the deepest part of the core hinterland, a wisp of invisible majestic aura suddenly descended upon him, causing Yi Xian's body to stiffen and then completely dissipate. In the next moment, the strong sense of pressure that Yi Xian had been feeling from the surrounding void completely disappeared. He knew that from this moment on, even without the protection of the thin film created by the headless infant's corpse, he would be able to freely walk in this core hinterland like the other native vicious beasts. He could even approach the netherworld furnace. Of course, if he wanted to enter the interior of the netherworld cauldron, he would not be able to do so. This also meant that he had been acknowledged by the netherworld furnace and the origin of all evil star region. After all, the origin of all evil star region existed for the netherworld furnace. At the same time, it also meant that Yi Xian's true form as a three-headed, six-armed demon ape had completely integrated into the circle of native ferocious beasts in the core hinterland. He had been completely accepted as one of them. The root of all evil star region, the buffer zone of the central region. Now, a day had passed. The Second Universe Coalition Army, which had retreated from the core hinterland in front of them to the buffer zone of the central region, had already finished reorganizing. Now, order had been restored. Many of the 12 million troops had been lost in the demon domain. By the time they arrived at the source of all evil domain, only 10 million remained. In the battle before the army retreated from the core hinterland, nearly 2 million battleships, fortresses, and fortresses were destroyed. Therefore, there were less than 9 million soldiers left in the Second Universe. The loss of these battleships was actually nothing much. What really caused the morale of the entire fleet to plummet was the death of that old monster from the Colored Python clan. Because of Du Jiting's death, the entire army had been shrouded in dark clouds. The various fleets were not in a good mood, especially the Colored Python clan. The old monster from the Colored Python clan's fleet was so angry that he was about to go crazy. This time, when the Second Universe Coalition Army invaded the First Universe, the Colored Python clan was simply unlucky. It was as if they had not checked the imperial calendar before leaving the house. Previously, when they were in the demon domain, the only old monster from the various fleets who had died was from the Colored Python clan. Now, in the origin of all evil star region, the only old monster who had died was from the Colored Python clan. This was simply F***ed by a dog. No, even if they were F***ed by a dog, they might not be able to feel so indignant. The only old monster in the entire army, the Blood Wyrm clan's elder Jiao Kong, immediately ordered the entire fleet to rest and reorganize indefinitely after chasing after the little demon ape that killed Du Jiting. No one, no ship, was allowed to enter the origin of all evil star region without permission. In the core hinterland of the star field, they would wait until reinforcements arrived. Immediately after, a scout fleet left. Their mission was to return to the Second Universe as soon as possible through wormholes. They would report everything that had happened here to the Second Universe so that the higher-ups of the various races could discuss and come up with a follow-up plan. At the same time, Jiao Kong also separated a fleet of 3 to 4 million from the nearly 9 million troops left in the central region's buffer zone. They followed the previously constructed stable passage through the outer region of the origin of all evil, and arrived at the entrance of the passage to guard it. This stable passage was constructed by the Second Universe Coalition Army. There was no reason for other forces to casually pass through. The mission of this guarding fleet was to prevent any other forces from entering, including the incoming Wan Luo Federation's Overwatch Council Senlon fleet. No matter who it was, if they wanted to enter they could. They could build a stable passage from another direction. Hardly had the army of almost 5 million warships been put in place when the first fleet that ran over eagerly to take a share of the pie arrived unstoppably. It was the Senlon fleet of the Overwatch Council that represented the Wan Luo Federation. Other than the Federation's Overwatch Council's Long Huai, who had personally led the army to question them, there was also a Star-Lord-level elder from the Wan Luo Federation's Senate. The Senate was the concentration camp of the Wan Luo Federation's high-end combat power. As everyone knew, the Wan Luo Federation was actually a front alliance formed by the humans of the First Universe and the various races of the Federation of the Second Universe. Their only enemy was the Tianji clan. Although it was the only force in the 3 universes that could contend against the Tianji clan and could be considered a colossus, in reality, the Wan Luo Federation did not have its own territory. Even the headquarters of the Federation was built on a large piece of land rented by the Immortal Dynasty on the Immortal Planet. Of course, from another point of view, the Wan Luo Federation could be considered to have an infinite territory. The entire third universe and the entire second universe where the human race was located were both territories of the Federation. However, that was only in name. In reality, these two universes were still managed by the various races themselves. However, basically, every race would have an existence above the Star Lord level who would enter the Federation's Senate. Generally, those who were sent to the Wan Luo Federation and entered the Federation's Senate were existences that were not very popular in their respective races. And they could obtain far more in the Senate than they could in their respective races. They could obtain cultivation resources. It could be said that the headquarters of the Wan Luo Federation had spent a lot of effort to rope in these Star Lords and even Domain Lords from various races. Chapter 37:18. The Star-Lord Federation Elder who had arrived with Long Huai in the Blue Fleet of the Federation's Overwatch Council was named Du Shifeng. Coincidentally, he was not only from the Second Universe, but also from the Colorful Python Clan. However, Du Shifeng wasn't a Star-Lord when he left the Colorful Python Clan. He had joined the Council of Elders of the Federation with his master. His master wasn't well liked in the Colorful Python Clan back then. He had competed with the current chief of the Colorful Python Clan for the position of chief of the clan, but failed. He was later suppressed, and it just so happened that the Council of Elders of the Federation extended an olive branch to him, so he left the Colorful Python Clan in anger. He took Du Shifeng with him. However, the master and disciple were treated with great respect when they arrived at the Council of Elders of the Federation. After 1,000 years, his master had broken through from the Star Lord state to the Region Lord state, and was already one of the Region Lords in the Council of Elders of the Federation. Even Du Shifeng, who had only been in the peak of the 9th level of the Cosmic State back then, had broken through to the Cosmo State and the Star Lord state after 1,000 years. He was no longer a burden to his master. Once he became a Star Lord, Du Shifeng had also become an official elder of the Federation, but he was still a Star Lord, which was one level lower than his master's level, which was that of a Region Lord. It was safe to say that everything Du Shifeng had was given to him by the Thousand Luo Federation and the Council of Elders of the Federation. He didn't have anything to do with the Colorful Python Clan, but it wasn't much different. Even to this day, Du Shifeng still remembered how the master and disciple had been suppressed and ostracized after his master failed in the competition for the position of chief. To put it bluntly, not only did he not feel a sense of belonging to the Colorful Python Clan, he even resented them. If not for this, the Senate of the Myriad Luo Federation would not have sent Du Shifeng to the Senlon fleet this time. Even more coincidentally, the Star Lord who was guarding the channel of 5 million warships in the Second Universe happened to be from the Colored Python Clan too. His name was Du Wei, and he was a direct descendant of the current leader of the Colored Python Clan. To put it bluntly, the Colored Python Clan was the enemy of Du Shifeng and his master. Of course, this kind of enmity referred to competition within the clan. However, as a matter of fact, as the current chief of the Colored Python Clan suppressed and ostracized Du Shifeng and his disciple after taking office, and as a result, they eventually left the clan and joined the Council of Elders of the Federation. The relationship that was originally just a competition within the clan had developed to a point where it was no different from real hostility. Because of this, when Senlin's fleet arrived, Long Huai and Du Shifeng, in the name of the Federation's headquarters, the Overwatch Council, and the Senate, ordered the guarding fleet blocking outside the stable passageway to make way. The two fleets almost erupted into conflict on the spot. The old Star Lord, Du Wei, who was guarding the fleet, was in a fit of anger. This time, the Colored Python Clan was at a disadvantage. They had lost Star Lords and Domain Lords one after another. For the entire clan, it was a heavy loss. Under such circumstances, he happened to run into an old rival who reprimanded him in the name of the Wan Luo Federation. How could he be kind? In the end, while the garrison fleet and the blue fleet that had come to ask for answers restrained each other and did not fight on the spot, the two Star Lords from the Colored Pythons, who had a grudge against each other in the void beyond the domain of the root of all evil, began to fight each other. This battle lasted for 2 days. The two old Star Lords fought with all their might. From time to time, there would be small abandoned stars in the void that were destroyed by the aura of the battle and directly exploded. A large area of the void thousands of miles away had become a battlefield. The aura was chaotic, and the battle raged endlessly. Without waiting for the shocking battle between the two old Star Lords to end, the other two fleets of the human clan, which followed closely behind the Overwatch Council of the Federation, finally arrived one after another. The Immortal Legion, which represented the eternal dynasty of the human clan, and the fleet of space battleships, which represented the 10 ultimate heavenly palaces. Apart from Long Ziwen, the cosmic state Long Ziwen, the commander of the Immortal Legion was also a Star Lord of the Imperial Dynasty. The fleet of space battleships of the 10 ultimate heavenly palaces was led by Gong Xingtian, the vice palace master of the Diju Palace. He was an advanced Star Lord himself, who was extremely strong. The three fleets arrived at the same time. Zhao Kong, the old Blood Dragon clan leader who was in charge of the main army of the second universe in the buffer zone of the source of all evil, finally showed up. Boom! Amidst a world-shaking boom, an energy claw the size of a mountain rushed out from the outskirts of the root of all evil star field. With a single swipe, it knocked away the two old Star Lords, Du Shifeng and Du Wei, who had been fighting for 2 days and nights in the void ahead. Immediately after, a figure with his hands behind his back walked out from the outer region. He seemed to be walking slowly, but in just 2 or 3 steps, he had already traversed millions of miles of space and arrived before the 3 fleets that were lined up in front of him in a triangle formation. It was Zhao Kong, the old realm master. The 1000 Net Federation, the Eternal Dynasty, the 10 ultimate heavenly palaces. You're all here. If the heavenly fate race had brought a few more fleets of slave races, the top forces of the 3 universes would have gathered here today. Standing in the void, as the only old realm master present, Zhao Kong's face was full of pride. He glanced at the fleets of the 3 forces that were lined up in the void in front of him. Then his face darkened, and he snorted coldly. Humph, as I said before, this is a secret alliance formed by the races of the second universe to launch a punitive expedition. I said that there was no need for the Federation and the human race to interfere. You sent a fleet with such fanfare. Do you think the races of the second universe can be bullied? The higher-ups of the fleets of the 3 forces all remained silent. Since the old monster didn't admit it, there was no point in blaming him. After all, the fleets that the 3 forces had sent first didn't have any old realm masters. Now that they were weak, they could only endure for now. Otherwise, if they offended this old realm master from the Blood Dragon clan, they would only be asking for trouble. Humph, don't blame me for not warning you. With just your 3 fleets, you'd better go back to where you came from. The source of all evil isn't a place you can touch. Now, the Colored Python clan has already lost a realm master. If you don't want to give up, think about it yourselves. If it weren't for the fact that we're all part of the Federation, I wouldn't have bothered to mention these words. After that, Zhao Kong flicked his sleeves and flew toward the periphery of the source of all evil. That's all I have to say. Think about where you want to go. Chapter 37:19. A region lord from the multicolored Python clan has perished? This news was simply like a huge bomb, and it stunned all the experts of the 3 fleets that were arranged in a triangle formation. After a short moment of silence, exclaims of shock instantly erupted and resounded through space. My God! What exactly has happened? A region lord from the multicolored Python clan has actually perished? This is simply sensational news. It's too difficult to accept. There is no doubt that in this star system, the source of all evil, there is some kind of shocking horror. No wonder the second universe's allied army left a fleet of 5 million ships to guard the passage they built. It is clear that they have stopped the momentum of advancing, Feng Luo said. That's right. It said that the root of all evil star zone is divided into 3 regions. The outer region, the central region buffer zone, and the central region. If I'm not mistaken, the second universe alliance army must have encountered a setback after entering the central region. What exactly is there? It's actually capable of causing a region lord to perish. How many days has it been? He clearly perished in battle. Could it be that a world lord is obstructing the path ahead? It shouldn't be. Otherwise, that region lord from the Blood WYRM clan would have probably retreated a long time ago. It's impossible for him to still be there. They clearly intend to wait for reinforcements. The allied forces of the second universe should have retreated to the central area, but they still haven't given up. Since it's able to make practically all the races in an entire universe not hesitate to mobilize such forces to seize it, and even after a region lord perished, they still refuse to give up and guard the passageway to prevent us from entering. Looks like the fortune of this root of all evil is absolutely extremely shocking. Along with the exclamations of surprise from the experts of the fleets, the higher-ups of the 3 fleets fell into deep thought as well. They'd expected that the plans of the clans of the second universe were extremely great, but the news they just obtained upon arriving here still caught them off guard. Since even a region lord had perished, then there were at least region lords native to this region up ahead, and there would definitely be more than a single one. Otherwise, there were 2 region lords amongst the allied forces of the second universe, so it was impossible for a region lord to perish after a battle. It was even to the extent that it was very likely that terrifying existences at the World Lord realm existed within this region of space. However, such a possibility wasn't very high. Otherwise, Zhao Kong would have probably retreated a long time ago. Based on the current situation, the strength of our fleet is probably far from sufficient to seize the fortune within this region of space. Long Huai from the Federation's Overwatch Council had a worried expression on his face. It's still insufficient even if we join forces with the Eternal Dynasty's undying army. We need at least 2 region lords to be confident in our success. In that case, we can only report the situation back to the Federation and request the Council of Elders to dispatch region lords. On the side, Star-Lord Elder Du Shifeng nodded with a hint of unwillingness on his face. To be able to make old ghost Jiao Kong like this, it's definitely extraordinary. If I'm not mistaken, the Alliance Army of the Second Universe should have just sent a small team of light-armored scouts back to report and request for help. Reinforcements. There isn't a huge difference in time between us, and the only difference is our grasp of information. When he spoke up to this point, Du Shifeng paused for a moment and frowned before he continued. Don't waste any more time. Give the order right away to build a stable passageway and advance all the way to the Central Region's buffer zone. The army will set up camp there, and then dispatch a small group of scouts to enter the core area and scout as much as possible. After that, immediately report the situation to the Federation and request reinforcements. In next to no time, Long Huai gave the order, and the Senlon fleet chose a breakthrough point at another direction. Over 300,000 forts of various sizes activated the spatial compaction device and advanced all the way towards the outer area of the region of space. Almost 5 million battleships of various types followed closely behind them, and they moved incessantly towards the depths of the Central Region's buffer zone. Similar orders were issued successively to the Eternal Dynasty's Undying Army and the 10 Extremity Celestial Palace's Stellar Battleship Army. The 3 enormous fleets chose different directions, and they built stable passageways at the same time as they advanced forward. At the same time, some comparatively smaller fleets started to arrive at the region of space. Some were from races like the Een Demon race in the Second Universe that did not join the Myriad Net Federation and preferred to be alone. Some were fleets from the slave races in the First Universe. There were also fleets privately sent by the 3 great human empires in the Third Universe, or secret forces of some large and small countries, as well as stellar battleship fleets sent by some small sects in the human cultivation camp. There were even some scattered rogue cultivators who came alone or in groups of 3 to 5. This time, the movements of the various races in the Second Universe's Federation were too big. At the beginning, almost all the forces in the 3 dimensions took it seriously and thought that the spearhead was directed at the Tianji race. However, today, the Tianji race had migrated and was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, this army of 10 million gathered by the various races in the Second Universe had strangely arrived at the star region of the source of all evil. Their targeting and purpose were too obvious. Almost all the forces in the 3 dimensions were keenly aware of some problems. Like cats and kittens that had smelled blood, they all flocked to the star region. Obviously, these forces who came through the 2 large wormholes that connected the 2 dimensions of the Second Universe and the Third Universe at the front of the Demonkin star region must have paid a toll when they passed through the star region of the Demonkin star region. Except for some rogue cultivators who came alone because they were too small of a target and could avoid the toll by activating the concealment array, the fleets of the other forces, big or small, had to pay a price if they wanted to pass through the star region of the Demonkin star region. It could be said that as to what the fortune in the star region of the source of all evil was, except for the allied forces of the various races in the Second Universe who had arrived first, all the other forces, including the rogue cultivators who had come after hearing the news, knew nothing about it. However, the Demonkin race had already made a fortune before the truth of the fortune in the star region of the source of all evil was revealed. At this moment, when countless forces in the 3 dimensions of the universe were converging on the star region of the source of all evil in the central region of the First Universe, the upper echelons of the Demonkin royal family and the Demonkin Emperor planet were all raising their glasses and celebrating. Now the Demonkin Emperor Mo Wentian and the upper echelons of the Demonkin race, who had truly tasted the benefits of being a ferryman, were completely convinced by this young Prince Xian. Chapter 37:20. When Grandpa Mo and the other 2 passed through the outer area of the source of all evil and entered the buffer zone of the central region, the star zone of the buffer zone was already bustling with people. Even before the countless low-level black beetles in the buffer zone of the central region were completely wiped out by the Second Universe's coalition army, this star zone had never been so lively. Although the central region buffer zone was called a buffer zone, it was actually an extremely vast star field. It was just that there were too many fleets stationed here. Although it did not appear too crowded, as far as the eye could see, this void was extremely lively, and there was no kind of one to be seen at all. Large areas of the Starry River were completely empty. The Second Universe's coalition army occupied a large part of the void. The Blue Fleet of the Myriad Net Federation, the Immortal Army of the Human Race's Science and Technology Camp, and the Starry Battleship Army of the 10 Ultimate Celestial Palaces of the Cultivation Camp also occupied a large part of the void. These were the 4 camps, and each camp had more than 5 million battleships of all kinds. They were spread out in the void. In addition to these 4 camps, there were also a large number of small fleets and teams formed by rogue cultivators who had gathered and temporarily formed alliances with each other. In short, the entire buffer zone of the central region was like a starry night market, clamorous to the extreme. What's going on? It's a bit noisy. After passing through the outer area that was full of cracks in the void with great difficulty, Grandpa Emo was shocked by the bustling scene in front of him as soon as he arrived at the bustling central region's buffer zone. While looking around in bewilderment, he extended his mental power to search for some details and muttered to himself, "Is this still the source of all evil? Isn't this the most dangerous place in the First Universe's planar universe? Look at how lively it is now. Why do I have the guts to come to the starry sky? Is this the feeling of a market?" It was no wonder that he had such an illusion. The scene in front of him was too smoky. Not only were there countless battleships in the void, but there were also a large number of starry sky powerhouses in the void outside the battleships, flowing endlessly. Basically, some small forces, small tribes, and a large number of powerhouses in the fleets of the rogue cultivators were taking this opportunity to communicate with each other. On one hand, they were gathering information from each other. On the other hand, they were taking advantage of this opportunity to exchange information and cultivation resources. From a certain point of view, the buffer zone of the root of all evil was indeed more like a temporary starry sky market. How could it still look like a plain-level starry sky danger zone? Of course, no matter what those factions and itinerant cultivators did, they could only stay in the relatively safe buffer zone of the central domain, where the countless low-level black beetles had been wiped out. As for the demarcation line in the void that connected to the core hinterland of the root of all evil, not to mention the other small forces and the rogue cultivator alliance, even the 4 major camps led by the allied forces of the various races of the Second Universe didn't dare to cross the demarcation line. Of course, the Myriad Net Federation's Blue Fleet, the Immortal Army of the Immortal Dynasty, and the Starry Sky Battleship Army of the 10 Extremity Celestial Palace had all sent out small teams of scouts in the past 2 days and quietly entered the core hinterland ahead. Although they had lost more than half of their scouts, at least the general situation of the core hinterland was known to the 3 top forces that followed closely behind the allied forces of the various races of the Second Universe. Although they still didn't know that in the depths of the core hinterland ahead, there was a large void refining array that could steadily produce the root of all evil. But at least they knew that in the core hinterland ahead, there were a large number of ancient starry sky ferocious beasts that were rarely seen in the outside world. They were suspected to be guarding something, and this should be the ultimate goal of the allied forces of the various races of the Second Universe. Regarding this information, the 3 top forces had already sent out small teams of scouts to quietly return to the Demonkin Star Zone. They would report to the headquarters of the various forces in the Third Universe and ask for reinforcements. However, it would take at least a month for the reinforcements to arrive. Even if they tried their best to jump through wormholes, it would still take a long time for them to go and return. Yi Xian was well aware of this. In fact, he was extremely well aware of the current situation in the central region's buffer zone. During these past 2 days, he'd practically wandered through the entire core hinterland. Besides not entering the netherworld furnace again, he'd practically explored every nook and cranny of the core hinterland. During this entire process, Yi Xian had seized the opportunity when no one was paying attention to put away the remains of many primordial beings that lay across space within the farmer god cauldron. There was no lack of the terrifying remains of some world lords amongst them. It could be said that up until now, merely Yi Xian's gains in this aspect could absolutely be considered shocking. The remains of these primordial beings at the region Lord Realm, and even the World Lord Realm would be the best raw materials for him to refine his medicine with the farmer god cauldron in the future. However, to Yi Xian, he had only obtained a few of the remains of the ancient creatures that lay in the void of the core. For him, the benefits were far from enough. Yi Xian could be considered to have expended a great deal of effort to come to the root of all evil. Not only had he racked his brains to obtain a devil ape true body with 3 heads and 6 arms, he hadn't even hesitated to sell his labor and become a barbecue worker for the sake of getting along well with the native beasts in the core hinterland. Moreover, it was obvious that this wouldn't be the only time. So long as a battle broke out between the native beasts in the core hinterland and the fleets of the various powers in the central region, and the former obtained a huge amount of ingredients after the battle, then Yi Xian would be able to obtain a huge amount of ingredients. He would definitely continue to barbecue. Since he'd put in so much effort, then his plans were naturally not small. Now that he'd obtained the acknowledgement of all the native beasts in the core hinterland, the netherworld furnace, and the entire root of all evil, he would be able to enter the core hinterland at will and approach the netherworld furnace without the protection of the headless infant's corpse. This was merely a benefit that came along the way. Besides that, Yi Xian had an official plan and the benefits within it that were waiting to be realized and obtained. Not to mention anything else. Just seizing this opportunity to make a huge fortune like he was a ferryman in the midst of a gold mining frenzy was absolutely impossible. On one hand, he had a premonition that the secret of his true identity would probably be exposed in the near future. So before that happened, he had to do his best to obtain a huge amount of warships and resources in order to prepare to return victorious. Chapter 37:21. During these 2 days, Yi Xian had gained a comprehensive understanding of the situation of the native beasts in the core area of the root of all evil. That day, he'd entered the core area for the first time in his true form as the 3-headed 6-armed devil ape, and he'd seen an army of 10 million native beasts. Even though it wasn't the entire army, it was almost there. At that time, the army of the Second Universe's various races had invaded the depths of the core hinterland. Under the summons of the 2 old monsters, the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise, the entire core hinterland, with the exception of a few native dire beasts that were in the midst of breaking through, the rest that could be drawn out had already left their nests. In short, even though there were more than 10 million native beasts in the core area of the root of all evil, there were less than 20 million native beasts, and there were around 15 to 16 million native beasts. Over 100 Star-Lord Realm old monsters. Over 1,000 Universe Realm experts. The rest were all indigenous ferocious beasts with cultivation bases below the Universe Realm. As for those above the Star-Lord Realm, besides the rare Region Lord Realm old monsters like the primordial porcupine and primordial tortoise, there were 2 more Region Lord Realm old monsters in the core area. However, they were at the peak of the 9th level of the Region Lord Realm, and they were charging into the Sector Lord Realm now. They hadn't shown themselves for many years. As for true Sector Lord Realm native beasts, there weren't any in the core area of the root of all evil. There had been one in the past, and it was a nether blood black dragon whose seniority far surpassed the primordial porcupine and primordial tortoise. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was the only overlord of the core area of the root of all evil. Because that nether blood black dragon had been at the peak of the 9th level of the Sector Lord Realm for tens of thousands of years. At that time, the primordial porcupine and primordial tortoise had just broken through to the Region Lord Realm. Not long after that, the nether blood black dragon had successfully broken through to the Universe Realm after close to 1,000 years of closed-door cultivation. After that, he'd entered the nether furnace for the sake of exploring its secrets. Because the higher-ups of the native beasts in the core area of the root of all evil had tried many times. Even Sector Lord Realm experts could only approach the entrance of the nether furnace, and they weren't able to go deep. In order to truly enter the nether furnace, one had to break through to the Universe Realm. What they didn't expect was that the dark blood black dragon, who carried the hope of all the indigenous fierce beasts in the core hinterland, entered the interior of the dark furnace. However, after that, they completely lost contact with it and never came out again. Originally, the primordial porcupine, primordial tortoise, and all the other native ferocious beasts in the core of the root of all evil were extremely curious about this enormous nether furnace that was as large as a planet. They could clearly feel a sense of familiarity from the netherworld furnace, but they didn't know what it was used for, let alone the actual situation inside. The only thing that could be seen was that the remains of primordial beings at the Region Lord Realm, and even the World Lord Realm would occasionally be sprayed out from within the nether furnace. Ever since the infernal blood black dragon disappeared into the netherworld cauldron, the primordial porcupine, the primordial turtle, and the other 2 primordial beasts were the only ones left in this core of the root of all evil. Their only wish was to break through to the Universe Realm as soon as possible. That way, they would be able to enter the nether furnace just like the infernal blood black dragon and explore its ultimate realm. Unfortunately, this was obviously still very far away. The primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle were only at the 7th level of the region Lord Realm. Even though the other two native ferocious beast kings were already at the 9th level of the region Lord Realm and had both entered seclusion to break through, they were still only at the 1st level of the region Lord Realm. But even if they succeeded in breaking through, they would only be at the 1st level of the sector Lord Realm. They were still an entire realm away from the minimum requirement to enter the Netherworld furnace. After understanding the situation clearly, Xianxia was so angry that he almost cursed on the spot. Of course, he was cursing that infernal blood-black dragon that had sent itself to its death. He had entered the nether furnace before, so he knew the situation inside. Now, he could vaguely guess the standards and requirements of the raw materials used to refine the all-evil liquid in the nether furnace. The universe realm was obviously the bottom line. This wasn't difficult to guess because even the remains of primordial beings at the sector Lord Realm had been treated as trash by the nether furnace and spat out. That pitiful infernal blood-black dragon had finally reached such a height on the path of life evolution and become a terrifying universe realm powerhouse. However, in the end it had ended up in such a state. It had crawled into the nether furnace and was ground into a 9-colored pulp by that enormous millstone and the remains of primordial beings. What was even more infuriating was that the other native ferocious beast kings, including the primordial porcupine, the primordial turtle, and the other two domain Lord Realm ferocious beast kings, had actually been thinking about following in the footsteps of that infernal blood-black dragon. This was simply unbearably stupid. Unfortunately, he couldn't say anything about this, so this made Xianxia feel extremely stifled and resentful. Fortunately, these 4 native ferocious beast kings were still a long way from reaching the universe realm. Even though Xianxia was indignant, at least he didn't have to worry about them foolishly sending themselves to their deaths like that infernal blood-black dragon for the time being. The outside world has been extraordinarily lively these past 2 days. After casting aside these thoughts, Xianxia turned to look at the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle. I secretly went out to take a look. In addition to the fleet formed by the allied forces of the various races of the second universe, the native races of the first universe have also arrived, as well as the human race of the third universe, in the past 2 days. While Xianxia had been understanding the situation in the core of the source of all evil from the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise, the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise, who were already brothers with him, had also understood the situation outside the source of all evil from Xianxia. They had almost never left the root of all evil star domain, nor had they come into contact with beings from the outside world. There was also no such thing as the Starry Sky Network, so they were completely unaware of all this. It was even to the extent that they didn't know that there were actually 3 known large-scale stable universes in the current world, and the root of all evil star domain was merely a small piece of the central region of the first universe. Of course, that was only in the past. Now, after Xianxia's explanation, they'd gained a rough understanding of the outside world, the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle, and even those 100-plus old fellows at the Star-Lord realm within the core hinterland of the first universe. According to my knowledge, besides the humans from the third universe that aren't tasty and have smelly meat, there are also the hellhole ants and some other special races out there. Because they don't have any meat at all, they're unable to eat. The others are all top-rate ingredients. For example, one of the 3 great native races of the first universe, the spatial rats. TSK, TSK, TSK. Their meat is really tender. After they're cleaned and roasted, it's absolutely a supreme delicacy. As he spoke, even Xianxia started to drool while the eyes of the primordial porcupine and primordial turtle lit up. They hadn't even heard this little brat praise the corpse of the region Lord Realm multicolored python like this. Could it be that these spatial rats are really that delicious? Chapter 37:22. Roar! Squeak! For ingredients? Hearing this, the primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise immediately became excited. They raised their heads and roared excitedly. The hundreds of Star Lords and Universe Masters nearby were also extremely excited. They roared as if they had been injected with chicken blood. However, Brother Porcupine and Brother Turtle, you shouldn't go. Your levels are too high. You only need to stay in the rear. You'll be able to intimidate them. Otherwise, if you go for a walk, they'll probably all run away. That would be terrible. Although this was basically the truth, Xianxia more or less had the intention of flattering him. The primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise felt extremely comfortable when they heard this. They only felt that this little ape was truly too sensible, mature, thoughtful, and even had amazing barbecue skills. This time, They had really picked up a treasure. The primordial porcupine and the primordial hairy tortoise deeply agreed with Yi Xian's suggestion. However, even if they were only going out to scout for information and not directly start a war, the little ape's cultivation was indeed too weak. They couldn't be reassured if he didn't go out with a team of guards. You should establish a team of guards. Don't have too many of them. 20 will do. That's right. Remember to follow the little ape closely. Don't let anything happen to him. Otherwise, I'll roast all of you if no one gives me barbecue. While talking, the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle glanced at the group of Star Lords and Universe Masters not far away. In the end, their eyes fell on the 100 Star Lords. Although the Universe Masters were not weak, they still felt that it was not safe. After all, there was a Zone Lord Blood Serpent guarding the buffer zone of the Central Zone. It was a coward, but a Zone Lord was a Zone Lord after all. The primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise weren't confident of winning without the protection of 20 local Star Lord beasts. A moment later, an escort squad of 20 Star Lord ferocious beasts was established. They were all enormous and intimidating. The auras they released from their bodies were even more shocking. Very quickly, Yi Xian leaped onto the back of a Jing-shrouded earth dragon that was around 300 meters in size. With a wave of his hand, the Jing-shrouded earth dragon raised its head and let out a long howl. Its figure immediately dashed towards the dividing line that led to the buffer zone in the central region. 19 ferocious beasts of different sizes followed closely behind it. They were all Star Lords. It was an appalling lineup. The Central Zone's buffer zone, the root of all evil. Grandpa Mo and the other 2 Star Lords of the royal family had already changed their appearances. Although they were still human beings, their unique mental power had been concealed. Grandpa Mo looked like a crude, unaffiliated human cultivator at this moment. The 2 Star Lords next to him were the same. They were 3 unaffiliated Star Lords from the human race, who had invited each other to compete for treasures in the root of all evil. At this moment, old Mr. Mo and his companions were sitting cross-legged in midair. There was a small table between them, on which there was wine and fruits. They seemed to be in a leisurely mood. There weren't many of them, only 3 Star State experts, but they were all Star Lords after all. One of them was at the peak of the 9th rank, which meant that he was a half-step Zone Lord. In the Central Region buffer zone, only the old monster from the Blood Wyrm clan in the allied forces of the Second Universe was stronger than him. Of course, there were also a few half-step Zone Lords who were on par with old Mr. Mo in the fleets of the other races and major forces. Even though they were few in number and were simply inconspicuous, the corner of space they occupied seemed to be rather spacious because there was a quasi-region lord amongst them. The experts of the other powers frequently shot their gazes over, and they were filled with fear. All of them were privately guessing the origins and background of these 3 Star Lords. However, nobody dared to disturb them. It was also at this moment that an earth-shattering roar was suddenly heard from the direction of the Central Zone's boundary, which the major forces had been paying close attention to. Then, an astonishingly luxurious patrol team appeared. A thorn armor earth dragon, which was 100 meters long, rushed out of the Central Zone's boundary majestically and appeared in the sights of countless experts from the major forces in the Central Zone's buffer zone. That thorn armor earth dragon was clearly at the peak of the 9th rank, which meant that it was a half-step Zone Lord. Even if the countless fleets of the various powers of the 3 universes were gathered here, there were less than 10 existences at such a level. So, as soon as it appeared, it naturally drew the attention of everyone. Even more shocking was that there were actually 19 other native ferocious beasts of various sizes following behind this quasi-region Lord Realm Earthworm, and all of them were at the Star-Lord realm. Such a luxurious group was simply terrifying, and the experts on the countless warships were practically instantly stunned. After that, numerous exclamations of shock that carried indescribable meaning resounded from the fleets of the Second Universe's allied forces. Look! That thorn armor earth dragon's back. My God! It's actually that little devil ape that killed the region lord of the multicolored python clan. It's actually still alive? Didn't Ancestor Jiao Kong pursue it immediately? He was actually unable to kill it? There's something off about the situation. Not only is that little devil ape alive and well, it's even patrolling in such a high-profile manner, and it faintly shows the intention of displaying its might. Are the native ferocious beasts at the core of the territory about to take action? All of this isn't the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter is the background of that little devil ape. An entire 20 Star Lords are patrolling with it, and they clearly intend to protect it. Moreover, that existence that's being trampled upon by it like a mount is actually a thorn armor earth dragon at the quasi-region Lord realm. That's heaven-defying. Exactly. The information revealed is too shocking. It's merely at the peak of the 9th rank of the cosmic realm, yet even a quasi-region lord has been reduced to being its mount. How terrifying is that little devil ape's identity? Is it the crown prince of the native ferocious beast clans? If it's really like that, then what's the backing behind that little devil ape? What realm of cultivation is it at? My God! A realm. Realm lord realm existence? That's simply inconceivable. Along with these exclamations of shock, Jiao Kong, who resided within the flagship of the Blood Wyrm clan's fleet, opened his mouth wide with astonishment. At this moment, even he was slightly terrified. After a short moment of being stunned, he actually gasped and muttered to himself. Even a quasi-region lord has been reduced to being his mount? How could he have 20 Star Lords as guards in one patrol? It's too terrifying. This little monkey really has a frightening background. At the same time, Grand Elder Mo and the other 2 Star Lords were completely dumbstruck. They suddenly recalled what Xianxia had told them. I'm the one with 3 heads and 6 arms. Chapter 37-23. What? This is the one who launched a sneak attack and killed the old monster of the Colored Python clan? He's only at the Cosmic Light realm. What a joke. So what if he's only at the 14th Great Realm? So what if he launched a sneak attack? If you have the ability, ask a 15th Great Realm Universe mighty figure to launch a sneak attack on a Great Realm Domain Lord. I'm afraid he'll be tortured to death on the spot. That's right. It's a fact that the old monster of the Colored Python clan was killed. This ancient ape demon has successfully defied the heavens. Monster. This is definitely a peerless monster. He's still in his infancy, but he has already killed a supreme domain lord. He's too bold. With the bloodline of the ancient ape demon with 3 heads and 6 arms, once he grows up, he's destined to lead the world. Is he the 7th peerless monster today? He was actually born from the native ferocious beasts of the source of all evil. However, he deserves his reputation. After all, even young Master Linghu and young Master Netherworld have never killed a supreme domain lord. Something that even universe mighty figures don't dare to think about was done by a junior ferocious beast. Along with the exclamations from the allied forces of the various races in the second universe, the powerhouses of the various forces in the surrounding void knew that the old monster of the Colored Python clan, the old monster, had died at the hands of the young ancient demon ape, who had appeared in such a high profile. Some people even exclaimed at his battle achievements and determined that the young ancient ape demon that Xianxia was impersonating was the 7th peerless monster today. When the exclamations reached Xianxia's ears, he immediately rolled his eyes. He realized that the term, peerless monster, seemed to have stuck to him. He couldn't get rid of it no matter how hard he tried. He had just changed his identity, and now he was the 7th peerless monster today. There was no need to explain his valiant life. He wasn't the only one who felt this way. Even the 3 Star Lords of the demon race had the same feeling in their hearts at this moment. After the initial shock and disbelief, the 3 of them had basically accepted this fact now. Especially when they heard the words the 7th peerless monster in the world, they were even more certain. Because others didn't know, but they knew very well that the previous 6 peerless monsters were all that brat alone. It didn't make sense that the 7th peerless monster who had just appeared was someone else. This time, this old man is thoroughly convinced. With a bitter face, Grandpa Mo shook his head and sighed. In a voice that only he could hear, he muttered, "It's one thing to have the true body of a demon ape with 3 heads and 6 arms. But there's also the prince of an indigenous ferocious beast. He has 20 Star Lords guarding him whenever he goes out. Such extravagance. Alas, I can't help but admire him." Ah! Nearby, the other 2 Star Lords looked at each other with weird expressions and also sighed. At this time, with the arrival of Xianxia, countless starry sky masters from various forces in the Central Territory's buffer zone all focused their attention on this luxurious patrol team with a strong sense of vigilance. After all, those were 20 Star Lords. Hey, do you see that? That's the fleet, warships, and fortresses of the Void Rats. There's an enormous black rat engraved on them. It's easy to recognize. Xianxia raised his finger and pointed to a corner of the void in front of him. He didn't lower his voice at all. The words that came out of his mouth were clearly heard by all the experts from the various powers in the surrounding void. Trust me. The meat of such rats is definitely more delicious than that of pythons. The latter is still a bit rough, but the meat of the void rats is different. It's delicate and sweet. However, it's disgusting if there's a bit of filth left when it's washed and peeled. After all, they're rats. Pew! Before he could finish, a lot of noises were heard from the fleet of the void rats. After only 1 or 2 sentences, the 3-headed 6-armed ancient ape demons had become the target of the entire clan. He wasn't small, but his words couldn't have been more vicious. He was too infuriating. No matter what, the Void Rat clan was still one of the top 3 clans of the First Universe's slave clans, and they were equally as famous as the Demon Clan and the Hell Ant clan. But now, they were being criticized in front of almost all the great factions in the 3 dimensions. Not only were they said to be delicate and sweet, but they were also said to be dirty. It was more than a slap in the face. It was basically a slap to the face and a stomp on it. Before the noises from the fleet of the Void Rats could stop, the 3-headed 6-armed ancient ape demons raised his hand and pointed in another direction. His words were as infuriating as ever. As for the hellish ants over there, they're the ones with the enormous black ants on their warships. They're the hellish ants. The hell ant is not a good thing at all. Its black shell is extremely hard, and its insides are filled with disgusting grayish-white meat. If it's fried, it might be crunchy, and can barely be used as a snack. It's definitely impossible to roast them. They're too meatless. It's simply infuriating. As expected, a lot of noises were heard from the warships of the Hellish Ants fleet. The Star-Lord Hellish Black Ant almost couldn't hold himself back. He was about to charge out and fight the annoying ape. Unfortunately, he held himself back in the end. The enemy's lineup was too magnificent. There were 20 Star-Lords, and one of them was a peak 9th rank Star-Lord. He would probably be crushed and killed on the spot if he were to charge out. Then, before the noises from the fleet of the Hellish Ants were over, the monstrous ancient ape demons pointed in the direction of the coalition army of the Second Universe. Hey, that's the fleet of the Second Universe's allied forces. Old friends, we've roasted a lot of them before, but there are some races you haven't tasted yet. Think of a way to get some later. Make a big pot of stew and stew them all together. While speaking, the primordial little demon ape began to introduce. The Second Universe's races have a top 10 ranking. Because these top 10 races have extraordinary bloodlines, the value of their flesh and blood is higher than that of other races. The Blood Dragons, the Cyan Rocks, and the Battle Lions are the best. Of course, the Barbarian Bull's meat is also good. It's chewy and chewy. The Golden Eagle clan and the Colorful Python clan were fine, but the Silver Eagle clan and the Greedy Wolf clan could not be eaten. The experts of these clans could only be thrown away as garbage if they were killed. The former was a birdman, disgusting to eat, and the latter was suspected to be a weasel close relatives. The meat is either smelly or sour. Chapter 37-24. A woo! Before Yi Xian could finish his words, an angry howl suddenly came from the flagship fortress of the Greedy Wolf clan's fleet. In between, there was a faint aura of a universe master. Obviously, this was a universe master in the 15th realm of the Greedy Wolf clan who was enraged. This was indeed the case. Although there were many clans that were criticized by Yi Xian at this time, none of the top 10 clans in the Second Universe were spared, including the Dark Turtle clan that had not come this time. However, compared to other clans, the Greedy Wolf clan had a violent temperament. In addition, Yi Xian said that he was suspected to be a close relative of a weasel and that his meat was either smelly or sour. This was not the first time that the Greedy Wolf clan's powerhouses had heard such words. Back then, young Master Linghu had humiliated the Greedy Wolf clan like this and killed the clan's young master, Lang Gang Lai. This kind of shame and humiliation had appeared again this time. With the violent temperament of the Greedy Wolf clan, it was obvious that they could not hold it in. Although the Star-Lord Old Monster in the clan's fleet did not say anything, the Greedy Wolf clan's Taoist son, Lang Gang Lai, who was accompanying the fleet, could not hold it in and roared angrily. Little monkey, you are relying on a group of Star-Lord Old Monsters to support you. What kind of ability are you to talk nonsense? Is the bloodline of the ancient ape demon so despicable? I, Lang Gang Lai, am also a young descendant of the Greedy Wolf clan. Do you dare to fight? I will definitely suppress you. A woo! As the voice sounded, a figure rushed out of the flagship fortress of the Greedy Wolf clan's fleet and floated in the void in front of the fortress. He immediately activated the bloodline in his body and showed his bloodline true body. This was a greedy wolf with a height of 1,000 feet and a body full of blood-colored hair. There was not a single strand of mixed hair. Ferocious flames filled the sky. He raised his head and roared toward the sky. Lang Gang Lai? The Taoist son of the greedy wolf clan? He is indeed extraordinary. Although he is a young descendant, his cultivation realm is not weaker than some of the clan's elders. He has stepped into the 15th realm. In the three Great Plains, I reckon that only the Taoists of the various clans can possess the cultivation level of the Universe Almighty in the younger generation. They are all hidden and nurtured with all their strength. They won't come out easily. I didn't expect that the greedy wolf clan would actually send out their Taoists this time. For such a young almighty being of the universe, I'm afraid that even in terms of talent, he's not weaker than Prince Xian, young Master Linghu, and the rest of the 7 peerless geniuses. You can't say that. The Taoists of the various clans have been nurtured through years of accumulation. Although their cultivation realms are stronger than Prince Xian, young Master Linghu, and the rest of the 7 peerless monsters, the latter earned the title of monster with his own strength. In my opinion, if we're talking about talent, the Taoists of the various clans can't compare to him. There's no point in arguing about this because everything will be revealed very soon. Isn't there a Tao child and an unparalleled monster here? It seems that a great war is about to break out. After this war, whether the Taoists of the various clans who have been nurtured for many years are superior, or the 7 peerless demons are superior, we will soon know. Hearing these discussions, the eyes of Jiao Kong, the old monster in the flagship fortress of the Blood Wyrm fleet, flashed. He seemed to be moved as he muttered to himself, "This is an opportunity." It seems that this little demon ape must be the child of some ancient ape demon at the sector lord level in the core hinterland. Otherwise, why would he have 20 Star Lords guarding him? Even the 2 old monsters, the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise, are afraid of him? Besides, he's only at the cosmic state, yet he can run rampant in this star zone, the source of all evil. It's very likely that there's only one sector lord in the core hinterland ahead. Otherwise, his child wouldn't be so rampant. It seems that if we can capture this little demon ape and make the ancient ape demon at the sector lord level hesitate, we'll be able to take the initiative. After all, it's extremely difficult for such a being to have a descendant. Seeing that he sent 20 Star Lords to guard his child, it's obvious that he values him very much. Jiao Kong became excited as he spoke. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Lang Gongqiang, who had already rushed out of the flagship fortress of the voracious wolf clan and was provoking him. "Lang Gongqiang, I'm Jiao Kong. This kid's identity is very sensitive. The older generation like us can't do anything. Otherwise, it would be even harder to capture him. I'll leave this mission to you. Continue to provoke him with words and ask for a battle between peers. Capture him at all costs. As long as he's restrained, I'll take action as soon as possible." Lang Gongqiang's eyes glittered. He vaguely guessed what Jiao Kong meant. If they could capture the little demon ape, the Alliance army of the Second Universe would be able to enter the core hinterland again and obtain the treasures there. Lang Gongqiang would definitely be the first to take the credit then. Lang Gongqiang was both angry and greedy at the thought of that. He was afraid that the little demon ape wouldn't accept the challenge, so he shouted even louder, "Roar! Little monkey, are you scared? If you are, go back to your mother and drink milk. You shouldn't have come to this space battlefield." Roar! This was no longer a clamor, it was clearly a humiliation. The 20 Star Lord level ferocious beasts protecting Yi Xian were instantly enraged, and a few of them were about to charge out. "Wait! He claims to be a junior. How can we bully him?" Before those Star Lords could rush out, Yi Xian sneered and dashed forward. "You're just a cosmic state weasel. I can kill you easily." Roar! When he finished speaking, Yi Xian had already reached the battlefield in the void. Although he was much smaller than Lang Gongqiang's greedy wolf bloodline true body, he was only 30 meters tall. However, he was fearless. Among the 3 greedy wolf bloodline true bodies, the greedy wolf bloodline true body faced the enemy and punched out. "You'll know who's going to kill who soon." "Roar!" Lang Gongqiang sneered. Without moving, he raised his head again and let out a long howl. There was no anger in his howl, nor was there any emotion. Instead, it seemed to be even longer. There was a strange rhythm within the howl, causing people's hearts to tremble. It was an indescribable feeling. Soon, a strange scene appeared. Following Lang Gongqiang's long howl, a bright silver moon slowly appeared in the sky of the buffer zone of the source of all evil, shocking the entire audience. It was obvious that this strange moon was related to Gang Chong. It was summoned by the mysterious wolf howl that he was currently emitting, or rather, it was condensed. Yi Xian's eyes glittered. The greedy wolf howls at the moon? It wasn't the first time he had seen such a scene. Yi Xian had experienced it from Lang Ganglai, the young patriarch of the greedy wolf clan, during the battle in the Shenong Cauldron. Obviously, the so-called Dao child of the greedy wolf clan was much more important than the young patriarch of the clan. Chapter 3725. But in fact, in any race, there is a hidden bloodline inheritance system, which is the Daoist bloodline. They are the true foundation of the bloodline inheritance of the entire race. Because of this, it was understandable that Lang Gongqiang's cultivation base was higher than the young patriarch Lang Gonglie's. Although both of them were well-known figures among the younger generation of the greedy wolf tribe, Lang Gongqiang obviously had more cultivation resources than the young patriarch Lang Ganglai. It can be said that for any race, the young patriarch can be abolished and replaced, but the Daoist absolutely cannot be lost. It is too difficult to cultivate them. At this time, Lang Gongqiang has indeed shown talent and strength that far exceeds Lang Ganglai. The same greedy wolf howls at the moon is displayed by him, and its power is clearly stronger than Lang Gonglie's. The greedy wolf's howl to the moon is an ancient divine ability passed down in the bloodline of the greedy wolf clan. But not every member of the greedy wolf clan can awaken it. Sometimes, it is normal that no one can awaken it in several generations. The bright moon in the sky is actually not a real moon, but a projection of the bloodline ability. It has a mysterious power. It is said that where the light of this bright moon shines, all the energy will be taken by the user of this bloodline ability, and it can be swallowed and controlled at will. In such a case, the members of the greedy wolf clan who boasted such bloodline techniques were almost invincible. They were like a real greedy wolf who could replenish their consumption endlessly in the battle and greedily loot all the energy illuminated by the moon, including those of their opponents. Previously, when Yi Xian was fighting with the younger generation of the second universe in the internal space of the Shenong Cauldron, he was quite moved by Lang Gonglie's greedy wolf howls at the moon. This kind of bloodline ability that can continuously devour energy in a large area for its own use in battle is indeed a bit heaven-defying. As long as the bloodline ability exists, it can continuously replenish energy, and it is simply in an invincible position, becoming an unkillable cockroach. In order to test the power of this bloodline ability, Yi Xian did not hesitate to wave his hand and throw out 2 spiritual lightning techniques. Of course, he was using one of his 3 true forms, the body of black fog, so it wouldn't arouse any suspicion. It was obvious at a glance that this body of black fog was proficient in energy attacks, not blood and chi power. Kacha! Kacha! 2 bolts of invisible lightning struck out toward the head of the greedy wolf in the void ahead. However, at the same time as these 2 lightning bolts crackled, the strange and hazy moon in the sky suddenly flashed. Immediately after, the moonlight poured down, and the outline of 2 thick lightning bolts vaguely appeared in the sky. As soon as the 2 lightning bolts appeared, they completely collapsed, turning into a faintly visible energy that quickly shot toward the bright moon in the sky. Sure enough, it was devoured again. Wherever the moon of the greedy wolf shone, all energy could be devoured. Lang Gongqiang's mastery of this divine ability was far greater than Lang Gonglie's. Even though he had not reached the level where he could instantly devour all energy with the moon of the greedy wolf. However, in this moonlight zone, the more active the energy was, the more likely it was that the bright moon would sense and exert divine power on it. Then, it would decompose and devour the energy. The speed of these 2 lightning bolts was too fast and extremely active, so they were instantly captured, decomposed, and devoured. Yi Xian was not surprised by this scene, but most of the starry sky masters in the warships around the void all had their mouths wide open. Their faces were blank, and it was obvious that they were extremely shocked. The greedy wolf howls at the moon was indeed extraordinary. Even this kind of invisible lightning was defeated and its energy was devoured. Moreover, the bright moon manifested by this divine ability clearly had some kind of connection with Lang Gongqiang himself. It allowed him to replenish his energy at any time during battle through the bright moon of righteousness. This was a lost ground. Your lightning divine ability is useless against this Daoist. In the area illuminated by the moon of the greedy wolf, the more active the energy is, the more likely it is to be instantly sensed and captured, then decomposed and devoured. The more you use, the greater the benefits this Daoist will receive. Ha! Seeing that one of the 3 real bodies of Yi Xian, the black fog body, was decomposed and devoured as soon as it released 2 invisible lightning bolts, Lang Gongqiang laughed complacently and suddenly waved his hand. Now, let's test the power of your lightning divine ability. Crack. Crack. To everyone's surprise, two strange cracking sounds suddenly came from the strange bright moon in the sky at this moment. Then, two moon-white lightning bolts struck down at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, they were above the head of Yi Xian's devil ape real body. In the void all around, exclamations sounded again at this moment. What? There's actually such a change? Not only did it decompose the opponent's attack, but it can also restore it and counterattack after devouring it directly? The moon of the greedy wolf is simply too amazing, okay? Lang Gongqiang's talent can't be so abnormal, okay? Yes, it's really too abnormal. To be able to comprehend the bloodline divine ability of the greedy wolf clan to such an extent and trigger the transformation of restoring and counterattacking, this is too amazing. Even in the greedy wolf clan, there are very few people who can awaken this bloodline divine ability. In the younger generation, it seems that only the former young master of the clan, Lang Ganglai, has this talent. I didn't expect that Lang Gongqiang not only awakened the moon of the greedy wolf but also comprehended a new transformation. As expected of the Taoist of the clan. This time, the prince of the indigenous fierce beasts, this lawless little devil ape, is probably going to be defeated. Although the ancient devil ape's bloodline is heaven-defying and has 3 real bodies, in the face of such a powerful ability, all energy attacks are useless, and even have a reverse effect. His cultivation realm is lower than Lang Gongqiang's, so he can't fight at close range at all. It's like his hands and feet are tied, and all means are ineffective. The only result is that he can only be suppressed. Bang! A woo! As soon as the last discussion fell, an earth-shattering sound suddenly came from the void battleground in front of them, followed by an extremely mournful howl, full of unwillingness and pain. The primordial little devil ape, who was expected by the powerhouses to not dare to fight at close range, directly teleported to the side of Lang Ganglai without any scruples, dodging the 2 moon-white lightning bolts at the same time. Then, he flipped his hand and summoned a giant cudgel, which was 1,000 feet long, and held it in the right hand of the primordial little devil ape, which was covered with black hair, and smashed the cudgel on the head of the giant wolf. Chapter 37:26. A woo! A long mournful howl resounded. Lang Gongqiang's huge eyes rolled up as he passed out on the spot. On the top of its head, a suspicious bulge the size of a small hill quickly appeared. Obviously, it was directly knocked out by the giant stick in the hand of the small Archean demon ape. It could be seen that the strength of the stick was so great that it made people shudder. This cudgel was actually another component of the Shenong cauldron, the Shenong pestle. This pestle had already been refined by Yi Xian, so it could change its shape at will. It could be big or small. Right now, when it was taken out by Yi Xian, it had deliberately changed its shape. It could not be seen at all. It had turned into a big weapon with a thin head and a thick head like a spiked cudgel. The small primordial ape demon was only about 100 feet tall, but it was holding a huge cudgel that was over 1,000 feet long. With just one strike, it knocked out the Taoist from the greedy wolf clan. Even the almighty expert's head was not able to withstand the blow, and a huge bruise appeared on his head. It was simply too ferocious. What a bullshasterisk Taoist. His head is too weak. Such a big bump appeared on his head after a light hit. He passed out immediately. I haven't even hit him enough yet. Just as the countless experts in the void opened their mouths in shock, the small archaic demon ape with 3 heads and 6 arms muttered in a human voice. It held the cudgel in its right hand and one of Lang Gongqiang's hooves in its left hand. It turned around and dragged Lang Gongqiang toward the 20 Star Lords behind it. This scene made countless people dizzy. The dignified Taoist of the greedy wolf clan, a mighty figure of heaven and earth in the 15th realm, looked like a prey that had just been hunted. He was dragged away in the void without realizing it. What made people even more speechless was that the guy who did this was still muttering to himself softly, complaining that his head was not hard enough and that he would pass out after a light hit. It was not satisfying at all. Pooh! Pooh! Far away, in the warships of the greedy wolf clan's fleet, the sound of vomiting blood could be heard clearly. Even the Star Lords who were commanding the fleet were infuriated by the abrupt scene. Seeing that the Taoist of his race was about to be dragged away, the Star Lord of the voracious wolf race could no longer care about anything else. After spurting out a mouthful of blood, he immediately rushed out of the flagship fortress. Roar! Little devil ape, let go of my clan's Taoist, or else we won't rest until we're dead. Roaring. The Star Lord of the Greedy Wolf simply activated his bloodline and revealed his true form, which was a silver-haired greedy wolf that was thousands of meters long. The terrifying pressure of a Star Lord spread out and turned into a wolf head that was thousands of meters long. It then bit Gongqiang, who was dragging the wolf, and was retreating. The little devil ape swooped down. Screech! Old wolf monster, don't you dare move. How shameless! You were the one who said that it was a battle between the younger generation, and now that you've lost, you're the one who's bullying the younger generation. Is the Greedy Wolf clan also shameless? Do you really think we're pushovers? If you want to fight, we'll annihilate all the members of the Greedy Wolf clan today. In the void up ahead, the 20 Star Lord ferocious beasts all moved. They rushed out and arrived in front of Yi Xian in the blink of an eye, protecting him behind them. However, they didn't stop and rushed in the direction of the Greedy Wolf clan's fleet. They were ferocious all the way, and it seemed like they were going to take this opportunity to get rid of the entire Greedy Wolf tribe fleet. Boom! The Jing Armor Earth Dragon took the lead. He was a peerless old man who had reached the peak of the 9th rank. He was extremely fast. He had revealed his true form, which was almost 10,000 meters long. He then shattered the wolf head that the Star Lord of the Greedy Wolf clan had launched. Pew! The Star Lord of the Greedy Wolf clan suffered a backlash as soon as the technique was shattered. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Fellow cultivators, don't be agitated. This is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Before the Star Lord of the Greedy Wolf race could react, Jiao Kong, who was in charge of the Second Universe's fleet, spoke. An invisible force wrapped around the Star Lord of the Greedy Wolf race and pulled him out of the battlefield, shooting back toward the Greedy Wolf race fleet. Jiao Kong was about to explode at that moment. He had never expected that the Dao disciple of the Greedy Wolf clan would be so useless. He had been knocked out by the little monkey in the blink of an eye. Not only had he passed out, he had also been dragged away in public. It was truly humiliating. However, the Star Lord of the Greedy Wolf clan was so impulsive that he even wanted to chase after the monkey, claiming that he would fight to the death. That old B*** gave the monkey an excuse to attack, and it was very likely that he would infuriate the ancient demonic ape at the center of the battlefield. That old monster was a terrifying being at the Sector Lord level after all. He wouldn't attack easily. However, the Star Lord of the Greedy Wolf clan had taken the initiative to claim that he would fight to the death. That was simply courting death. Jiao Kong was so angry that he could only try to mediate the situation, which was equivalent to forcing him to show weakness. After all, he was the commander-in-chief of the army of the Second Universe and the strongest person in that army. Now, in order to ease the atmosphere, he had no choice but to say such words of weakness. This had a great impact on the morale of the entire fleet. Fortunately, the monkey had restrained himself in the end. Even though the 20 Star Lord realm native beasts were strong, there was still a gap between them and Jiao Kong, who was at the Region Lord realm. At this moment, when they noticed that the little monkey was unharmed and a Region Lord had shown weakness, they could be considered to have barely obtained an explanation, so they didn't continue pursuing relentlessly. All of the 20 Star Lord realm ferocious beasts stopped in midair after Jiao Kong spoke. After a few more cries of indignation, he turned around and retreated to a spot thousands of kilometers away from the other side of the void. Right when Jiao Kong thought that this matter had temporarily come to an end, Yi Xian, who had retreated to a spot millions of kilometers away, turned around at this moment. The club in his hand vanished, and with a flip of his hand, he withdrew a ferocious black demonic blade. He didn't say anything and slashed at Lang Gongqiang, who was being dragged behind him. Ow! A shrill howl resounded once more. This strike had sliced off Lang Gongqiang's left hind leg, and it woke him up from the pain. He howled before falling unconscious once more. That hit was really too vicious. Even now, his brain was still buzzing incessantly. Suddenly, the pain woke him up for a moment. It was just a conditioned reflex. You want to fight to the death? Come, let's hurt each other. Chapter 37:27. Roar! A woo! The Star Lord of the voracious wolf clan roared furiously, his voice shaking the surroundings, but this time, he didn't continue to taunt. He had already realized how unwise his actions had been. However, watching the path chosen of the greedy wolf clan being chopped off by the primordial demon ape and roasted in public made him furious, so he decided to vent his anger in such a way. Sizzle! The Shenong flames that Yi Xian had summoned from the space inside the Shenong cauldron started roasting Lang Gongqiang's enormous hind leg as soon as it enveloped it. Sizzle. 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 It was the sound of the fat in the wolf's leg being roasted. Very quickly, a strong meaty aroma wafted out, gradually spreading far and wide in the surrounding void. Some of the experts in the void outside and not in the cabins of the battleship subconsciously sniffed the aroma, saliva flowing uncontrollably from their mouths. Yi Xian was only joking when he said that the meat of the greedy wolf clan was either smelly or sour. As a matter of fact, the meat of the greedy wolf clan was delicious, and it was even more extraordinary after being roasted by the Shenong cauldron's dual-colored flames. It could definitely be called a meat medicine. After all, Lang Gongqiang was a Dao disciple of the greedy wolf clan. He had been nurtured since he was young, and the greedy wolf clan had used all of their resources to nurture him. It was unknown how many heavenly and earthly treasures had been thrown in, but his flesh and blood were even more precious than ordinary greedy wolf clan experts. At this moment, even Yi Xian couldn't help it. He swallowed hard when he smelled the scent. It was only the hind limb of the true body of the greedy wolf. Naturally, it wouldn't have been enough for the 20 Star Lords to feast on it. At this moment, seeing that the wolf's leg was about to be roasted, the 20 Star Lords, including the thorned earth dragon, all shrunk their bodies to be much smaller than Yi Xian's 30 meters tall body. They were clearly ready to share the roasted wolf's leg later. It was just a wolf leg, and they could only shrink their bodies to be able to taste a bit of it. Otherwise, any one of them could be swallowed into their stomachs in a single gulp. After a short while, the entire wolf leg was completely cooked. Yi Xian waved his hand and withdrew the Shenong dual-colored flame back into his body. A golden and shiny roasted wolf leg appeared in the void, still dripping with golden grease. An exotic aroma assailed everyone's nostrils, making them instantly drool. At this moment, the sound of saliva slurping echoed from the warships of the fleets far away in the void. Even the Grand Cultivators and the Star Lords couldn't hold themselves back after seeing the golden, greasy leg of the roasted wolf. On the side of the allied forces of various races in the second universe, the sounds of drooling coming from the fleets were especially loud and clear. This made the higher-ups of the allied forces feel very awkward. This was a hind limb that had just been cut off from a Dao disciple of an allied race. Now it was being roasted. All of them were drooling, and they really couldn't hold it in anymore. However, this awkwardness didn't last long, because as the Jing armor earthworm and the other 20 native ferocious beasts, along with Yi Xian, began to eat the golden wolf leg at the same time. Perhaps affected by their wolf-like enjoyment, even the greedy wolf clan began to drool. The sounds of drooling also began to come out from the warships of the fleet. If the members of their own race were like this, what was there to be embarrassed about? This was really too speechless. The original awkwardness spread, and the higher-ups of the fleets of various races in the second universe were all embarrassed. However, this embarrassment was all concentrated on the experts of the greedy wolf clan. Some of them couldn't hold it in and swallowed subconsciously. They didn't expect to make a sound. This was tantamount to slapping their own faces, making the Star Lords of the greedy wolf clan angry out of humiliation. They couldn't wait to split open a space crack in the void and crawl in. It was really too embarrassing. Sigh, one wolf leg is really not enough to eat. It's gone before I've had enough. It was also at this moment that a large roasted wolf leg had been eaten up by Yi Xian and the 20 gluttonous old monsters. Only a large leg bone was left in the air, and with a wave of his hand, he absorbed it into his body. Yi Xian reached out and wiped his mouth. He rolled his eyes and said in a tone and expression as if he hadn't had enough, "It's a pity that we can't cut off another hind limb of his. It wouldn't be good if we really killed him." It seems that there was a misunderstanding in the past. Although the greedy wolf clan is a close relative of the weasels, their flesh is still very delicious. The meat is thick but not rough, thin but not greasy. We've just caught a greedy wolf, so we have to raise it well. When its hind limb grows out, we'll cut it off and roast it. That's the way of the king. Puh! Hiss! As soon as Yi Xian finished his proud words, a muffled sound came from the flagship fortress of the greedy wolf clan's fleet again. The old monster of the greedy wolf clan was so angry that he coughed up blood again. In the fleets of the other clans, there was a lot of gasps. The words of the little primordial demon ape were too vicious. It was as ferocious as ever. It captured the Taoist of the greedy wolf clan alive, cut off one of his hind limbs, and roasted it in public. It was fine if it was eaten, but in the end, it didn't intend to let him go. Instead, it wanted to raise Lang Gongqiang like a carnivorous pig or dog. It wanted him to regrow the hind limb that was cut off. Then it would cut it off and roast it. That was the way of the greedy wolf clan. If the Taoist of the greedy wolf clan was reduced to such a state, although Lang Gongqiang was the only one to suffer, the entire greedy wolf clan would be humiliated and never be able to wash it off. Thinking of that, a lot of gnashing noises came from the warships of the greedy wolf clan's fleet. The entire clan had been humiliated by a little primordial demon ape that was only in the cosmic light realm. It made them so angry that they were all grinding their teeth. I seem to hear someone grinding their teeth, and it seems that there are more than one or two of them. Yixian waved his hand in the direction of the greedy wolf clan's fleet. An arrogant smile appeared on the faces of his three true forms, who were made of flesh and blood. He shouted, "Is there anyone who doesn't agree? If you don't agree, feel free to come over. I'll fight all of you alone. After all, you're just chickens and dogs." If even the Taoist is so weak, it's not hard to imagine the combat ability of the entire clan. You'd better come. My 20 brothers and I haven't eaten our fill yet. The more welcome it is. We'll just treat it as someone delivering food to us. We can eat our fill. Pooh. Chapter 37:28. Old thing, are you threatening us? If you have the guts, make another sound, and this turtle will immediately destroy your entire fleet. Just as the greedy wolf clan's Star Lord finished speaking, two responses came from the core of the source of all evil in front of them. Then, the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle rushed out from the boundary line. They still looked harmless. The former was only about 1,000 feet in size, while the latter was only about 100 feet in size. The former was a little turtle that was about 10 feet in size. Adding on the fact that the aura within their bodies was not obvious, it was simply impossible to detect them. With a cold glance, under the premise of not knowing anything, it was likely that no one would think of this pair as the old monsters of the domain masters. However, the words and tone of the pig and the tortoise instantly betrayed their identities. Although the elites from the various forces who were staying in the buffer zone of the central region had never seen them before, except for the allied forces of the various races of the second universe, they were still able to figure it out immediately. The commanders of the fleets were instantly vigilant, and the hairs on their backs stood up. The rogue cultivators in the void stood up one after another, not daring to show a calm and unruffled attitude of watching a good show. At this moment, the two old monsters in the core of the source of all evil had arrived. Not long ago, the allied forces of the second universe had invaded. If they had not taken action and severely injured Jiao Kong and Du Jiting, the situation today would have been completely different. It could be said that the two old monsters in front of them had directly and completely changed the direction of that battle, causing the allied forces of the second universe to suffer a crushing defeat. Even the old monster of the colored python clan, Du Jiting, if he had not been severely injured by the harmless primordial turtle, how could he have been so easily beheaded by the primordial little demon ape and died? Although Du Jiting was beheaded by the primordial little demon ape, in fact, the one who had truly caused his death was the primordial little demon ape. Now, these two old monsters of the domain had actually walked out of the core of the source of all evil in front of them and arrived at the buffer zone outside. No one could not be nervous. Once they showed their might, a bloody storm would immediately set off in this area. Who knew how many starry sky masters would die here with grievances? With the terrifying strength of this pig and turtle, even the Blood Wyrm clan's domain lord old monster Jiao Kong had to be wary of them. What they said just now was not exaggerated at all. A small fleet of the voracious wolf clan could be easily destroyed. Some rogue cultivators were vigilant, ready to turn around and escape from the buffer zone at any moment. The Star Lord of the greedy wolf race also realized this. When he was facing the 20 Star Lord ferocious beasts, he didn't dare to show his face anymore. At that time, he chased after Yixian and rushed out of the flagship fortress. After being dragged back by Jiao Kong, he felt a lingering fear when he thought about it. Now, in addition to the 20 Star Lords, 2 more area lords had come from the depths of the native beast's nest. At this moment, he was so scared that his whole body was trembling slightly, and the hair on his back was standing on end. He didn't even dare to breathe, let alone make a sound. Why are you here? Didn't I tell you just now? This ape can deal with this bunch of chickens and dogs outside by myself. Yixian, who had transformed into a 3-headed and 6-armed devil ape, walked forward slowly when he saw the primordial porcupine and turtle. He raised his hand and greeted them in an extremely casual manner. Obviously, Their relationship was not ordinary. This scene made the experts in the surrounding void gasp once again. At this moment, practically no one had any doubts about Yi Xian's identity. He was merely at the 14th level of the cosmic realm, yet he was able to call two terrifying old monsters of the domain as brothers. His identity as the crown prince of the native ferocious beasts had been confirmed. At the same time, the guess that there was at least one ancient devil ape at the World Lord realm in the core area ahead had been confirmed. Otherwise, how could these two primordial porcupines and turtle act in such a manner towards a tiny little devil ape at the cosmic realm when they were at the advanced stage of the region Lord realm? A huge wave of sighs of emotion instantly resounded through the sky, and the gazes that shot at Yi Xian were filled with envy. Presently, it wasn't that the various powers of the universe didn't have any ancestors at the World Lord realm, but existences at such a level usually had very few descendants. Even if they did, they were born countless years ago when they were still comparatively weak. Now they'd long since passed the age where they had to rely on their parents, and they'd grown up themselves. After all, the higher the level of evolution, the lower the possibility of giving birth to a bloodline descendant. Because once a bloodline descendant was born at such a time, then because the mother's foundation was too solid and high, it would possess an extraordinary bloodline and formidable strength as soon as it was born. This didn't conform to the laws of the Grand Tao. As it was said, it was natural selection. The height of evolution of any living being was directly proportional to the chances of giving birth to a bloodline descendant. It was precisely because of this that practically all the ancestors at the World Lord realm of the various powers of the universe didn't have young children. Yet now, an example had appeared. This little devil ape that was merely at the 14th level of cultivation at the cosmic realm actually had a direct descendant of an ancient devil ape at the World Lord realm. His luck was simply off the charts. A World Lord realm devil ape had only gotten a child at an old age, so the degree to which he doted on his child was obvious just from the fact that he had an entire 20-star Lord realm experts by his side when he casually roamed the territory of his clan. With such a background and backing, this domineering and arrogant little devil ape was practically bound to command the world and grow into an overlord in the future. After all, the lifespan of an ancestor at the World Lord realm was too long, so could anyone do anything to him when he had the protection of such a terrifying existence? Of course, only the experts of other powers who didn't know the true background of the little devil ape would have such thoughts. As for Grand Elder Mo and the other 2-star Lord realm experts of the demon race, the only thing they could sigh in their hearts was Prince Xian's heaven-defying methods. Calculating the time, he had only set off a day or so earlier than Grandpa Mo and the others. Who could have expected that by the time Grandpa Mo and the others arrived, he would have already laid such a solid foundation among the indigenous ferocious beasts in the core hinterland? A random patrol had 20-star Lord realm experts escorting him, and 2 random domain Lord realm experts could casually call him brothers. This was simply too F***ing unbelievable. If it wasn't for Yi Xian's style just now that allowed Grand Elder Mo and the others to confirm his identity, they would have suspected that they had gotten the wrong person. Fellow Taoist pig, fellow Taoist turtle, what happened before was just a misunderstanding. Chapter 37-29. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Previously, the Tao disciple of the Second Universe's greedy wolf clan was strong, and he was just sparring with you. Little devil ape. Jiao Kong, who had no choice but to show up, had a bright smile on his face at this time. He said very politely, "It's normal for the younger generation to be angry because they were fighting. Who hasn't been young before?" But, speaking of this, Jiao Kong changed the topic, and his voice instantly became softer. He said tentatively, "But now that kid has been taught a lesson, and he even had one of his hind legs chopped off by the little demonic ape. It can be considered a big loss. The two of you also know that the Tao disciple of a race is not a small matter. Why don't you let him go? Fellow Taoist, I promise that I will teach him a lesson later." Jiao Kong almost patted his chest when he said the last sentence. It was as if he was telling the truth. F***ck off. Who are you trying to fool? Did you get kicked in the head by a mouse? As soon as Jiao Kong finished speaking, the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle's faces slapped on the spot. They didn't treat him as an old monster of the same realm at all. It was as if they looked down on the old monsters of the Star-Lord realm or even the almighty figures of the universe. It couldn't be helped. It was really because this so-called elder of the Blood Dragon clan had not performed well in the previous battle. He had long left the impression of a coward in the hearts of the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle. The latter was so angry that he almost vomited blood on the spot, but he didn't dare to impulsively turn hostile on the spot. If that was really the case, the result of him facing two old monsters of the same realm was obviously destined, and that was that he would be miserably killed. This might be the reason why he left the impression of a coward in the hearts of the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle. As an expert, if one did not have the heart of an expert, one could only show off their might in front of the weak and the younger generation. But if they were to meet an expert of the same level who was slightly more unyielding, they were destined to be looked down upon. That little wolf cub was captured alive by Little Devil Ape. We don't have the qualifications to let him go. If you have the ability, you can ask him for it yourself. That's right. Don't say that we didn't give you a chance. Weren't you the ones who clamored for the younger generation to fight? Sure. Then, the primordial turtle turned around and looked at the fleets in the void. He sneered and said, "The so-called three planes of the universe must be full of powerful forces and unaffiliated cultivators. We won't bully you. Don't you want the fortune deep inside the core hinterland? Don't you want that little wolf cub back? Sure, as long as it's a junior, we won't interfere. As long as you have the ability, just go and find the little hairy ape. We'll give you a place in the core area. The edge of the land. The younger generation geniuses of any power can enter the core area. The little hairy ape will also wait for them at the edge of the core area. It will not enter the depths of the core area. The older generation like us will also retreat to the depths of the core area and not interfere in this battle." The little hairy ape himself said that he wanted to fight all of you by himself. What else can we not trust? Bring it on if you dare. The little hairy ape will challenge all the younger generation geniuses of the three planes on its own. However, let me make it clear first. The older generation like us won't enter the edge of the core area. None of you who aren't the younger generation are allowed to cross the line into the core area. That area will be left to the younger generation. If any of you disobey the rules, don't be afraid of us. We'll kill you mercilessly if you don't. Also, even the younger generation of your species will be responsible for their own lives if they enter the edge of the core area. You'd better think carefully before you enter. You might be able to enter alive, but you won't be able to cross the line. After that, the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle turned around and waved at Xianxia, leading him and the 20-star Lord ferocious beasts to the boundary that would lead to the core area. The last words of the primordial porcupine only came from afar, and were heard by every starry sky powerhouse on the scene before its figure disappeared. Remember, the time limit is only 3 months. This is already very lenient. It is enough for the major forces to send scouts back to their clans and dispatch the younger generation heavenly legends. If the little hairy ape is still safe and sound, all the forces will retreat from the root of all evil. Otherwise, we'll kill every one of you that stays. Xianxia, who had been confused at first, was enlightened after hearing that. As it turned out, the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle were trying to force all the fleets of the forces from the three planes to leave the central region's buffer zone. Most of the fleets that had stayed in the central region's buffer zone were the top forces from the three universes, such as the fleets of the races from the second universe, the first universe, the official fleet of the Federation of the third universe, and the 2 fleets of the human race and the cultivators. These top forces all cared about their reputation. Since they had made a bet with the native ferocious beasts of the root of all evil, then if they really lost this 3-month bet, they naturally wouldn't be so thick-skinned as to stay in the root of all evil starfield and not leave. Even if they still didn't give up, they would at least withdraw from the central region's buffer zone. They wouldn't even stay in the outer region of the root of all evil. Basically, they would completely withdraw from the root of all evil starfield and stay in the void of the universe outside the starfield to come up with other plans. Although they didn't leave in the end, they had withdrawn from the central region's buffer zone and the outer region after all. Even if there were any subsequent actions, with the distance between these 2 regions as a buffer, the native ferocious beasts in the core hinterland would have enough time after receiving the information from the scouts at the front. They would have time to respond. The central region's buffer zone and the outer region were very vast. If there were scouts stationed at the edge of the outer region, once they made a move, it would take at least 5 to 6 days to reach the core hinterland if a large fleet approached. Even if a small group of domain masters and star masters entered in a hurry, they would still have about 3 days left for the native ferocious beasts in the core hinterland. 3 days was enough for them to make some arrangements. After realizing this, Xianxia sighed faintly. The primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle had spent so much effort to make such arrangements because there wasn't a single sector master among the native ferocious beasts in the core hinterland. Chapter 3730. However, What Yixian didn't understand was how they could be so sure that he could single-handedly challenge all the younger generation geniuses from the various powers of the three Great Plains. Were they not afraid that he would lose the bet because of his carelessness? Yixian and the 20 Star Lords who were escorting him crossed the border, following the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise, and entered the core of the root of all evil from the central region's buffer zone. The two old men immediately grinned when they asked the question that they were puzzled about. "You little brat. Do you really think we're senile? We wouldn't have let you take risks if we weren't confident in you. Not to mention the young geniuses of the major forces out there. Even the experts of the older generation wouldn't be able to do anything to you as long as they aren't Star Lords yet." That's right. The Dao disciple of the Greedy Wolf clan was careless, but he was strong and had grasped the second level of the Greedy Wolf's Howling Moon technique. His combat ability was quite shocking among the young geniuses. Even so, didn't you still knock him out? Kid, you're really amazing. Earlier, you utilized a starry sky treasure to kill that multicolored python that had fallen from the ranks of region lords. This time, the club you used to smash the wolf unconscious was actually a primordial treasure of the same rank as well. Besides, the dual-colored flame in your hand is also giving off a strong desolate aura. Hee, we don't know what you've gotten, but it's definitely not a problem for you to crush the so-called young geniuses of the major forces out there with those methods. You'll be fighting all of them by yourself. Stinking kid, don't lose face for us native ferocious beasts. Once you lose this bet, then the situation we'll face would be extremely severe. Because at that time, practically 1 or 2 region lords from the various powers would arrive here, and we wouldn't occupy an advantage in terms of overall strength. Even if those 2 fellows who were in closed-door cultivation 1,000 years ago come out, unless they successfully break through and enter the Sector Lord realm, even if our native beast race has 4 old monsters at the Domain Lord level, we are absolutely unable to go against the top powers of the 3 universes. Of course, if we have no other choice, we can still retreat to the Netherworld furnace deep in the core hinterland. Then, there will be a lot of remains of realm lords along the way, which will stop the fleets of all the forces from moving forward. It's even possible that they'll be wiped out. After all, they're not protected by the Netherworld furnace like us. But in this way, the secret of the Netherworld furnace will be exposed to the world. At that time, it's hard to guarantee that the various powers won't send Sector Lords or even universe-grade experts that surpass Sector Lords. If the situation really develops to such an extent, the final result, not to mention us native ferocious beasts guarding the Netherworld furnace, even the Netherworld furnace that has existed for countless years will be in danger. Never underestimate the experts of the starry sky. Many old freaks don't make an appearance rashly because they seek the heaven Dao. But if there are sufficient benefits, then they'll arrive before anyone else. When they spoke up to hear, the primeval porcupine and tortoise actually sighed faintly at the same time, and they seemed to be sighing with emotion about how they were too weak and could only helplessly go with the flow. It had to be said that the feeling this scene brought to Yixian was very strong. 2 supreme old freaks at the advanced stage of the Region Lord realm were actually sighing faintly before him right now, and they seemed to be in high spirits. This caused Yixian to suddenly feel that it was laughable at the beginning, and then it was lamentable at the end. He was merely at the cosmic realm, and he was even a step away from attaining the cosmic realm. So when compared to the primeval porcupine and tortoise, he was a true joke. Brothers, don't worry. Everything will be fine with me here. They're just a group of useless people, so they can dream of leaving. While feeling moved in his heart, Yixian raised his hand to rub the tortoise's fur, and then he stomped forcefully on the back of the primeval porcupine beneath his feet before he spoke these words. At this moment, what he really wanted to tell them was the terrifying truth about the Netherworld furnace. However, he gave it a moment of thought and decided not to do so. He was slightly worried that the primeval porcupine and tortoise wouldn't be able to accept it in a short period of time. After all, the Netherworld furnace was practically equivalent to a form of belief or even faith to them and all the native ferocious beasts that lived at the core area of the root of all evil. On the other side, Yixian and all the native ferocious beasts had heavy thoughts in their hearts. On the other hand, the higher-ups of the various powers in the buffer zone outside the core area were the same, and they all had their own thoughts. They actually set a 3-month bet? What do those 2 old monsters want to do? They're too arrogant. That little primeval demon ape alone wants to challenge all the young geniuses of the top powers in the 3 universes. Do they really think that all the Taoists of the various races are hotheads like Lang Gongqiang? They don't have any combat experience at all. They were knocked out and dragged away by a stick. Shoo, keep your voice down. That Star Lord of the greedy wolf clan has been suppressing his anger for a long time and is looking for a place to vent it. This must be the intention of the ancient devil ape in the depths of the hinterland. Just from the battle just now, one could see the importance of battle experience. Lang Gongqiang was the Dao child of the greedy wolf race, and his cultivation was stronger than the little ancient devil ape. His talent was even more extraordinary. His race's greedy wolf howls at the moon divine ability was even more powerful than the little ancient devil ape. He has comprehended the second level of transformation. But in the end, he ended up in such a miserable state and was knocked out by a stick. This battle has made the primeval demon ape feel something. These hidden Taoists really lack combat experience. The primeval demon ape is worried that the little primeval demon ape will also have this problem. After all, when it grows up in the future, it will definitely need to go out and travel. It's impossible to have a Star Lord protecting it all the time. It just so happens that this time, most of the top powers in the three universes are here. There are countless geniuses of various races. It's the best time to temper the little primeval demon ape. It's too overbearing and too arrogant. It actually used the young geniuses of all the top powers in the three universes as whetstones. This battle is already unavoidable. The Taoists of the various clans will definitely descend one after another. The primeval little devil ape is too arrogant and ruthless. Not only did it capture a Taoist and ridicule him like a clay chicken, it even roasted him in public. How can the Taoists of the various clans endure this? Time flew, and 7 days passed. Chapter 37-31. This area lord was an elder of the Yingji clan, one of the top 10 clans in the second universe. He was a mid-stage area lord. The Taoist he was escorting was called Ji Jingfeng. Like Lang Gongqiang, he was also a Taoist of a clan. His cultivation was also at the 15th realm, the universe realm, and he had been hidden by his clan. With the arrival of the Yingji clan's domain lord, the powerhouses of the three major realms who were stuck in the buffer zone of the root of all evil immediately felt as if they had eaten a pill of reassurance. Their originally uneasy mood gradually calmed down. At the very least, from the surface, only the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise showed high-end strength in the core zone of the source of all evil. Before this, there was only the Blood Wyrm clan's old monster Jiao Kong, who was an old monster at the domain lord realm, and that was indeed a cause for concern. However, it was different now. In terms of strength, both sides were already equal. Furthermore, there would definitely be more domain lords from other races arriving. The reason why the Yingji race's domain lord was the fastest to arrive was because they were Yingji birdmen. This domain lord was originally proficient in speed, and in terms of comprehension of the void laws of the universe, his attainments were deep. Jiao Kong immediately sent out an invitation. The two area lords gathered in the flagship of the Blood Wyrm clan's fleet and had a secret discussion. In the end, they went into hiding and were not in a hurry to act. After all, they were indeed worried about Ji Jingfeng alone. That primordial demonic ape, which was only at the peak of the cosmic light realm, was truly too ferocious. On the 8th day, another one of the top 10 clans in the second universe, the Golden Eagle clan's area lord, arrived. He brought along the clan's Taoist, who was also at the 15th realm of the universe realm. His name was Xianxia. On the 9th day, one of the top 3 clans in the first universe, the Space Rat clan, finally had an area lord. He also brought along the clan's Taoist, the 15th realm of the universe realm of the younger generation, Shu Wushuang. At this point, there were already 4 area lords in the buffer zone of the source of all evil. Over the past 2 days, the Blood Wyrm clan's area lord, Jiao Kong, who had been acting with his tail between his legs and had almost no presence, was moving around frequently. It was as if he was going through doors. He would occasionally walk out of the flagship of the Blood Wyrm clan's area lord fortress, and visit the Golden Eagle clan's area lord fortress. Even the Space Rat clan's area lord fortress, which was originally hostile to him, had been visited by him. This made the experts of the various large powers feel rather speechless. Compared to before the arrival of these 3 old monsters, Jiao Kong felt as if he was jumping up and down. The fact that 4 old monsters of the region lords were guarding the buffer zone of the central region made them extremely confident. On the 2nd day after the region lord of the Space Rat clan arrived with the Taoist child of the clan, which was also the 10th day of the 3-month bet, the 4 old monsters of the region lords discussed and spoke one after another. It's time. Let's enter the core area's edge. Bring that arrogant and despotic little demon ape to see us. He actually dared to use the prodigies and even the Taoists of the various large powers in the 3 dimensions as whetstones. This time, we'll let him taste the bitter fruit. This battle will be led by Ji Jingfeng, Xianxia, and Shu Wushuang, the 3 universe realm Taoists. The prodigies of the other clans and powers can participate. However, their cultivation cannot be lower than the void realm. Otherwise, they'll just be sending themselves to their deaths. My blood Wyrm clan's Taoist hasn't arrived yet. Batian, you'll lead a few of your clan's prodigies and enter the battle. The Batian that Zhao Kong was talking about was Zhao Batian, the prodigy of the blood Wyrm clan. He had fought with a Netherworld young master before. In that battle, Zhao Batian, Peng Jingxiao, and Shi Bafeng fought the Netherworld young master by themselves. In the end, Shi Bafeng was directly roasted. Zhao Batian and Shi Bafeng had to turn around and flee. At this moment, the 2 of them were also in their respective clans' fleets. Obviously, they would also participate in this battle. In addition, the other powers also sent 2 or 3 void realm prodigies to participate in the battle. The slaves of the first universe were all unfamiliar faces. However, in the second universe, besides Zhao Batian and Peng Jingxiao, there were also some old acquaintances of Yi Xian. For example, the little princess of the colored python clan, Medusa, was also a void realm prodigy. As for the human clan and the myriad Luo Federation, Gong Wuxin, Chou Doufu, Wu Chenzi, and Yu Xianlong were also close friends with Yi Xian. They were once captured by Yi Xian in the Shunnong Cauldron in the Heavenly War Empire star area, one of the 3 great empires of the human clan's technology camp. The first prince of the Everlasting Dynasty, Long Xiang, the 2 crown princes of the Heavenly Chen Kingdom and the Heavenly Battle Kingdom, Zhan Lingfeng, and Su Biqing were also participating in the battle. As for the fallen demon prince, the demon dust lady, the unfettered man, and the fairy Yin Xia, who had appeared out of nowhere, they did not come this time. Ever since the 4 of them lost to Yi Xian in the system's competitive mission, they had completely disappeared. No one knew what they were doing. Yi Xian occasionally thought of them, but he was very suspicious. He's just a little primordial demon ape at the perfection level 9 of the cosmic light realm. How dare he challenge the prodigies of all the top powers in the 3 dimensions? He's simply courting death. Only that hothead Lang Gongqiang would suffer at his hands. This time, this Taoist will definitely capture him. Don't talk nonsense. This Taoist's blood is boiling. Who cares about the 7th peerless prodigy? I'll start from the last one and suppress him one by one. As Ji Jingfeng, Shu Wushuang and Xianxia, the 3 universe realm Taoists, spoke arrogantly, the prodigies of most of the top powers in the 3 dimensions of the universe, as well as some young unaffiliated cultivators, formed an army of 100 people and rushed toward the boundary line in front of them. Soon they disappeared. They entered the periphery of the core hinterland of the root of all evil. Crystal Ball Mirage. Gong Wuxin roared as soon as he entered the periphery of the core hinterland. This was the command and instruction of Gong Xingkai, the vice palace master of the Diju Palace, the commander-in-chief of the human clan's fleet. As this violent roar sounded, a silver-white brilliance instantly rushed out from his body. It went straight into the sky like a meteor, hanging in the void above the edge of the hinterland. It turned into a transparent silver ball with a diameter of a meter, pouring out a faint moonlight-like brilliance. This technique was very magical. At first glance, it didn't look like a technique at all. Instead, it looked like a silver-white spherical magic treasure. Gong Wuxin had used this technique in the space inside the Shunnong Cauldron before. Chapter 37-32. Gong Wuxin and the others still didn't know that the person they were going to deal with was young Master Linghu, who had made them suffer in the Shunnong Cauldron. Otherwise, they would have turned around and fled immediately. At this time, as Gong Wuxin activated the crystal ball playback technique, all the scenes at the edge of the vast hinterland were transmitted through the silver-white crystal ball suspended at the top of the void, and all the experts of the major forces in the buffer zone of the central domain saw it. As for the depths of the core hinterland, the primordial porcupine, primordial turtle, and other indigenous ferocious beast experts were all paying close attention. They were also in the core hinterland and were not separated by the void barrier between the core hinterland and the buffer zone of the central domain, so they were not able to use the crystal ball playback technique. They could see through everything. The core hinterland of the origin of all evil was extremely vast. Just the edge of the hinterland was tens of millions of miles away. Previously, the tens of millions of battleships of the various races of the Second Universe had launched a large-scale space war here with the indigenous ferocious beasts at the edge of the core hinterland. Vast. The hundreds of young heavenly prides of various races who had entered the edge of the hinterland did not see Yi Xian's existence immediately. At this time, he had manifested his three-headed, six-armed demonic ape true form, and was sitting cross-legged in the void in front of the edge of the hinterland alone. He was neither surprised nor happy. His entire aura had merged into the void, like an ancient well without ripples. Yi Xian was also very much looking forward to this battle. In his opinion, he had just advanced again not long ago, and now his cultivation base was already at the great perfection of the void ninth order. In the state of manifesting his three-headed six-armed demonic ape true form, his cultivation base had directly increased by 2 realms, reaching the great perfection of the cosmic light ninth order, the great perfection of the cosmic light ninth order. But after all, he was still not a universe almighty. Yi Xian was preparing to temper himself in this battle, so that the qi and blood power in his body would surge to the extreme. Then he would swallow a tube of level 13 liquid during the battle and break through in the battle, stepping into the 13th realm in one fell swoop, the Genesis realm. At that time, in the state of his three-headed six-armed demonic ape true form, Yi Xian would step into the universe almighty realm in one step. The universe realm was a dividing line. Otherwise, those in the universe realm wouldn't be called universe almighties. Once the devil ape true body entered the realm of universe realm, Yi Xian was confident that he would be able to capture the 3 universe realm cultivators who had entered the core hinterland, as well as the hundreds of young prodigies from various clans, without using any other means or abilities that might expose his identity. As long as he could take down all of them, Yi Xian would be able to achieve his goal. And this goal was related to the level 14 and level 15 liquids that he urgently needed. Just as Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged in the void, pondering, a 100-man army divided into several groups and rushed over from several directions, finally arriving from 1,000,000 miles away. The first ones to discover Yi Xian were Ji Jingfeng, Shu Wushuang, and Xianxia, the 3 universe realm Taoists. I see him. Little monkey, prepare to die. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh! Xianxia was the first to attack. With a roar, he activated the bloodline in his body and revealed the bloodline true body of the Golden Eagle tribe. With a flap of his wings, he released a rain of golden flames. It was the unique bloodline technique of the Golden Eagle tribe, the Flaming Eagle Plume Rain. The Flaming Eagle Plume Rain was a rain of energy arrows formed by countless golden feathers. After he revealed his bloodline true body, his wingspan was thousands of feet. Such a huge golden eagle was covered with countless golden feathers, and a small part of the sky was illuminated in an instant. Every energy feather was golden. Not only was there a light, but there were also faintly visible flames rising from them. It was as if even the void was being roasted, making a strange sizzling sound. This was clearly a powerful attack of a large area. However, at this moment, countless golden feathers were pouring down from the sky, all concentrated in a small part of the void and whistled toward the primordial little demon ape. Phoenix Dance. Immediately after Xianxia, the Yingji clan's universe realm Taoist Ji Jingfeng also suddenly launched an attack. After a roar, he instantly manifested a giant silver bird that was thousands of meters long. Its entire body was steaming with a layer of fiery red flames. It was like a phoenix bathed in flames. With a sharp cry, it rushed toward the primordial little demon ape. Phoenix Dance was a bloodline technique of the Yingji clan. This kind of technique could condense the power of the bloodline in the body into an invisible Gangqi coat shaped like a divine bird phoenix, and it had an extremely high temperature. Not only could it play the role of a protective Gangqi, but it could also cause additional damage to the enemy with the high temperature of the phoenix wings in battle. The first move of the Rosy Clouds, Rosy Clouds. At the same time, the last Taoist, the Space Rat clan's Heaven and Earth Taoist, Shu Wushuang, also let out a sharp scream. His body swayed and turned into a giant rat that was 100 feet long. With a flip of his palm, he actually directly took out a long-handle saber. According to legend, the Rosy Cloud saber technique was a sword technique comprehended by a certain martial genius of the Spatial Rat clan when he was practicing his sword under the glow of the sunset. There were a total of 6 moves, respectively, Rosy Clouds, Rosy Clouds, Rosy Clouds, Rosy Clouds, Rosy Clouds, and Rosy Sunset. This saber technique was the inherited secret technique of the Space Rat clan, the 6-move saber techniques. Its power increased gradually. It was said that it could even split the void. Its power was extremely powerful. At this moment, a rat with a body size of 1,000 feet was waving a long-handled broadsword. The afterglow filled the sky in an instant, and it swept toward the primordial little demon ape in front of it. This scene was too weird. Not only were Gong Wuxin and the others behind the three Taoists dumbfounded, but even Yi Xian, who was still sitting cross-legged in front of them in the void, opened his mouth wide subconsciously. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning on the spot. A rat waving a broadsword and commanding the wind and the clouds. It was simply amazing. No one else could do this. The three Taoists were all at the universe realm. At this moment, they all showed their huge bloodline true bodies. Almost at the same time, they used their bloodline divine abilities and inherited secret techniques. They formed a triangle in 3 directions and attacked the primordial little demon ape sitting cross-legged in the void. Behind the 3 Taoists, there were dozens of young talents from various clans in the 3 realms. All of them were extraordinary and powerful. More than 100 powerhouses joined forces to attack the primordial little demon ape, who was only at the universe realm, the 14th realm. This scene was so shocking that when it was transmitted to the buffer zone outside the root of all evil through Gong Wuxin's crystal ball projection technique, it instantly caused a lot of gasps. Old monster Jiao Kong and the other 3 old monsters who were guarding the buffer zone of the central region let out hearty laughter at the first moment. Chapter 37-33. A flaming rain of eagle feathers came from all directions. A cloud of saber flames whistled through the air. There were also illusions of divine birds and fiery phoenixes that were surging with bright red flames appeared in front of the 1,000-foot-tall Ji. Although the 3 Taoists were young, they were all experts in the 15th level of the starry sky. At this moment, they performed their respective bloodline powers and inherited secret techniques, and surrounded the little primordial ape in a triangle formation from 3 different directions. In the blink of an eye, they had covered more than half of the distance of 1,000,000 kilometers. In a few seconds, they would be close to the little primordial ape. At this moment, the little primeval devil ape that was sitting cross-legged with its eyes closed finally stood up slowly. It had 3 heads and 6 arms, and its eyes emitted bright lights as it stood in midair like an invincible god of war that looked down upon the world. "You are just a bunch of chickens and dogs. How dare you come out and make a fool of yourself?" Seeing that the attacks from 3 directions were about to come, the little primordial ape was still fearless. The physical body of the 3 Taoists' true forms spoke in human language. Then, before anyone could react, the true form of the primordial ape with 3 heads and 6 arms instantly disappeared from where it was as if it had teleported. What's going on? He actually used the void teleportation to escape? Isn't he always domineering and arrogant? Why did he change his style all of a sudden? Ha ha ha. He's scared after all. It's ridiculous that the native ferocious beast prince ran away without a fight. Especially when he was running away. He was so thick-skinned that he said such words to save his face. How disappointing. As the little primordial ape disappeared, the 3 Taoists, who had performed their bloodline powers and inherited secret techniques, were all stunned for a moment. Then they laughed smugly and mocked. They were sure that the little primordial ape had run away without a fight, so they teleported and ran away in an instant. Because they couldn't detect any aura in the void in front of them at all. The 3 of them were Taoist-level existences of their respective clans. Although they were young juniors, their cultivation realms had already stepped into the universe realm, and they were almighty figures. The little primordial ape was only in the cosmic light realm. No matter how mysterious the concealment secret techniques it had, it couldn't escape from their perception. At the very least, he could still capture a trace of chi. Search. He probably hasn't escaped from the void at the edge of the hinterland. Otherwise, it would be no different from admitting defeat. That would be too laughable, and he would become the laughingstock of the 3 dimensions. The Golden Eagle clan's Taoist, Xianxia, sneered. He turned around and rushed in another direction. Ji Jingfeng, the Taoist disciple of the Inji clan, did the same. Following behind him were more than 30 young heavenly talents from various clans. They rushed in another direction and could not stop laughing. Ha ha ha. That's not necessarily true. With 3 of us here, he has no chance at all. Other than running away, what else can he do? Let's be careful. Let's split up and search. That guy's void teleportation technique is a bit strange. I actually couldn't capture the aura of his teleportation. The Space Rat clan's Taoist waved the large blade in his hand, but the expression on his face was somewhat dignified. He warned, In addition, don't forget how he defeated Lang Gongqiang before. This little monkey likes to knock people out with a stick, so the big head in his hand should be extraordinary. Be careful of being backstabbed by him. Bang! A woo! The Space Rat Clan's Taoist disciple, Shu Wushuang, had just finished his words when a loud bang suddenly came from the direction where Ji Jingfeng had left. Then, an incomparably shrill scream resounded through the void, and more than 100 Taoists from various clans in the periphery of the hinterland were shocked. All the spectators of various clans in the buffer zone of the central region were so shocked that they trembled. Everyone's gazes subconsciously gathered in the direction of the miserable howls. The scene that entered their eyes caused their expressions to immediately change. The legendary big head stick had reappeared as expected. At this moment, it was in the right hand of the primordial little demon ape. No one knew whether this guy was too lucky or Ji Jingfeng of the Yingji clan was too unlucky. The primordial little demon ape should have performed 2 teleportations in a row. The first time, it disappeared and went somewhere in the periphery of the hinterland. Immediately after that, when the 3 Tao children of the universe led the dozens of heaven's prides of the younger generation of various clans to spread out and turned around to rush in 3 different directions at the same time, he once again performed a second teleportation and made a return thrust. Coincidentally, after this second teleportation, its figure actually appeared behind Ji Jingfeng of the Yingji clan who had turned around to leave. Therefore, the latter immediately suffered a tragic fate. A huge black stick, which was 100 feet long and thin, was directly swung up from the void and smashed hard on the back of Ji Jingfeng's huge bloodline true body's head. The loud sound just now was the result of this attack. The shrill scream that followed was from Ji Jingfeng's mouth. On the back of his head, a suspicious protrusion the size of a small hill was rapidly becoming apparent. As for Ji Jingfeng himself, like Lang Ganglai, his eyes rolled back and he fainted on the spot. Moreover, before everyone could react, the 3-headed 6-armed primordial little demon ape suddenly waved its hand and directly took him away. The huge bloodline true body of the Yingji clan disappeared in the void. The people who saw this scene most clearly were the more than 30 young geniuses of various clans who were originally following Ji Jingfeng. The primordial little demon ape appeared in the void not far in front of them, and then with a flip of its hand, a huge stick appeared and smashed hard on the back of Ji Jingfeng's head. Such a ferocious scene had long since stunned this group of fellows. Although they had a large number of people, their cultivation strength was not as good as Ji Jingfeng's. Only a few of them had reached the 14th realm, the cosmic light realm, and a small half of them were at the 13th realm, the Genesis realm. The rest were all at the 12th realm, the void realm. Facing the primordial little demon ape, whose cultivation strength was at the peak of the cosmic light realm, they were no match at all and did not even have the courage to fight. Otherwise, these hundreds of Taoists of other clans would not have been following behind Ji Jingfeng and the other 2 Taoists of heaven and earth. They originally thought that with a Taoist of heaven and earth in front, even if the primordial little demon ape appeared, there would not be a situation where they would be the main attacker. But now this scene clearly appeared. After knocking the Yingji clan's heaven and earth Tao child, Ji Jingfeng, unconscious and taking him away, the ferocious little primordial devil ape suddenly turned around. Its eyes were shining brightly as it held the famous black stick in its right hand and dragged it behind its back. With a leap, it rushed towards them. Looking at that posture, it was clearly a tiger in a flock of sheep. Run! It's coming, oh my God! It's over this time, it's so ferocious, even if we all go together, we can't withstand its stick. Chapter 37-34. What? Ji Jingfeng, the Taoist of the Yingji clan, followed in the footsteps of Lang Gongqiang and was knocked unconscious by the primordial little demon ape? Oh my God, this is the second Taoist to be tricked by him. He is only at the peak of the 9th rank of the cosmic light realm, but he defeated the 15th rank Taoist of heaven and earth in succession. This primordial little demon ape is going to defy the heavens. What a huge outsource. Too terrifying, too astonishing. That infamous big black stick is obviously not an ordinary object. It ruthlessly smashed the back of the head of that universe almighty expert. The latter was swollen, but it was completely unscathed. It is at least a quasi-starry sky treasure. Too shameless. This time it is obviously a shameless trick. Otherwise, how could our Taoist of heaven and earth be knocked unconscious by his stick so sullenly? The second time this brat teleported back, the location he appeared at was too coincidental. He was right behind Jing Feng, about 70 to 80 zhang away from the back of Jing Feng's head. The probability of that happening was so small that it was almost negligible. How could he have done that? How could he have such outrageous luck? It should be like this. If there is no accident, this little monkey did not teleport away at all. The hundreds of young geniuses who participated in this battle were all fooled by him. The little monkey just perfectly hid his figure and aura. In fact, he has been following someone all the time. But Jingfeng is too unlucky to be chosen by him and become the first target. What? There is such a powerful concealment secret technique? Even the Taoist of heaven and earth can't see through it? He can't sense the slightest trace of qi, otherwise it is impossible to determine that he has teleported away in the void. Eye technique. If I were Xianxia, the next time I encounter such a situation, I can only use my eye technique. The Yin-Yang Eagle Eyes is an amazing eye technique. I dare not say that I can see through illusions, but it basically has a similar effect. Yes, if such a strange teleportation appears again, Xianxia will have to use the Yin-Yang Eagle Eyes. If it is just a concealment secret technique, it will not be able to escape detection. Otherwise, we will lose this battle. As Jingfeng was knocked unconscious and then put away, the experts of various races who were watching the battle in the buffer zone of the central region immediately exclaimed in surprise. Especially the few Universe Realm experts and Star-Lord old monsters of the Yinji clan. They were so angry that their noses were crooked. Previously, it was only the greedy wolf clan who had lost a Taoist disciple, and they had secretly mocked them in their hearts. They did not expect that the tables would turn. Today, it was their clan's turn. In the blink of an eye, it was their clan's turn. Thinking of that, Jingfeng, the dignified Tao disciple of heaven and earth, had a powerful divine ability and bloodline secret technique. But now, he didn't even have the chance to use them and had already become the captive of that little monkey. Every time they thought of this, the old monsters of the Yinji clan had a kind of monstrous sullen feeling that wanted to vomit blood on the spot. In addition, some people saw a clue. They thought that the location of the little primordial demon ape's teleportation was too coincidental. The probability was almost negligible. Therefore, they suspected that the little primordial demon ape had not teleported away at all. It had just hidden its figure and followed them. At the back. Later, some people mentioned the bloodline magic of the Golden Eagle clan, the Yin-Yang Eagle pupil technique, and thought that this technique could restrain the little primordial demon ape. The Yin-Yang Eagle pupil technique was a very mysterious pupil technique. It belonged to the auxiliary bloodline magic of the Golden Eagle clan. It could see through, and have a certain degree of power to see through illusions. In addition, it was said that it also had a 360-degree view. Once this bloodline magic was activated, there was no blind spot in the whole view, and it was a comprehensive insight. Although it could not be achieved in the early stage, it could gradually approach the omnivision after cultivation. However, the range of this omnivision state would increase according to the level of the user, and it could not cover too wide an area at first. Unfortunately, although Xianxia had the Yin-Yang Eagle pupil technique, Yixian was not a pushover. His demon soul pupil was the supreme overlord of pupil techniques. If he really had a pupil technique duel with Xianxia, the latter would be the one to die. Of course, among the powerhouses of the major forces who exclaimed, there were still many people with discerning eyes. Some of their guesses were almost the truth. Yixian had indeed not left. His figure had only disappeared because he had activated the perfect oscillation of the secret mental technique. Now, in the true form of the three-headed six-armed demon ape, his cultivation had reached the peak of the 9th rank of the cosmic realm, and he was only one rank away from the universe realm experts. When he fully activated the perfect oscillation in such a state, the universe realm experts, who were only slightly stronger than him, naturally couldn't detect it. They could feel the slightest bit of aura. As a matter of fact, if Yixian fully activated the perfect oscillation in his 15th realm, the universe realm, not to mention the Star Lords, even the old monsters of the Zone Lords would be fooled by him if they didn't pay special attention. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't be able to detect it at all. Yixian had already demonstrated all this to the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise when he left the core of the hinterland and entered the gambling battlefield at the edge of the hinterland. Therefore, at this moment, when they saw that he had indeed used this mysterious concealment technique to deal with his opponent, and that he had dealt with a heaven and earth Tao child with a strike of the stick, in the depths of the hinterland behind them, thunderous cheers instantly rang out, and the roars of beasts did not stop. At the same time, after knocking Jingfeng out with a blow, Yixian had already turned around and rushed toward the 30 or so young geniuses of various races who had been following Jingfeng. As for the other two directions in the distance, Shu Wushuang, who was waving his saber, and Xianxia, who had manifested the true form of a 1,000-meter-long golden eagle, had also noticed the unexpected situation. Their expressions changed drastically, and they roared furiously. They led dozens of followers behind them and rushed over together. "You little monkey, don't run if you dare. I'll definitely cut off your dog head with one blow. You're too shameless, little demon ape. You're a descendant of the ancient demon ape, but you're always doing such a thing. Have you considered your mother's feelings?" These two fellows' mouths were too poisonous. One of them was clamoring to cut off Yi Xian's head, while the other directly cursed at Yi Xian's mother, causing the killing intent in his heart to instantly rise. Bam! With one blow, Yi Xian directly knocked out 7 or 8 of the 30 or so young geniuses of various races who had just been chased by him. Then, after waving his hand and putting those guys into the Shenong cauldron in his body, Yi Xian didn't pay any attention to the other 20 or so young geniuses of various races who were howling and fleeing. A fierce light flashed in his eyes, and he raised his hand and pointed at Shu Wuxia and Jianghu. Chapter 37-35. Yi Xian, who disappeared in the blink of an eye, still didn't use his teleportation ability and instantly left. Instead, he once again activated his mental secret technique to perfectly conceal his figure and aura, not leaking out in the slightest. He was very confident in the perfect oscillation mystic technique. On the one hand, Yi Xian, in the form of the 3-head 6-arms demon ape real body, was infinitely close to the power of the universe realm. On the other hand, the perfect oscillation mystic technique had been upgraded twice and was now a high-level mystic technique. Its power was extraordinary. Even though he had not officially stepped into the universe realm, Yi Xian was confident that even the Star Lords would not be able to see through it if they did not pay special attention to it. As for the junior Taoists of the various clans who were only in the universe realm, they did not even need to think about it. Therefore, Yi Xian did not feel any pressure when he used it. He had just used this mystic technique to knock Ji Jingfeng out, and now he wanted to use it again to knock Ji Jingfeng out. Of course, this was also because he did not know that the Golden Eagle clan had a kind of yin-yang eagle eyes that could see through illusions. Otherwise, with Yi Xian's cautious character, he would not be so reckless. After concealing himself, Yi Xian's figure flashed as he directly charged towards Jianghu. At this time, in the depths of the eyes of Jianghu's huge golden eagle real body, a black and white light suddenly flashed. At this moment, Jianghu activated the special auxiliary bloodline ability of the Golden Eagle clan, the Yin-Yang Eagle Eyes. Although with his attainments in the Yin-Yang Eagle Eyes, he could not clearly see Yi Xian's figure after it was activated. However, he could see a blurry mass of energy, which was moving quickly toward him. It was about 30 meters tall, which was exactly the height of the primordial little demon ape. Jianghu realized what was going on and sneered. "Just as I thought, the boy has never teleported at all. He has mastered a weird concealment technique. Under the illusion breaker of the Yin-Yang Eagle Eyes bloodline technique, all he can do is show up as a blurry cluster of energy." However, for Jianghu, this was enough. At this very moment, that mass of energy was rapidly approaching the direction behind him, making a small circle and approaching from the side. Jianghu did not change his expression and pretended not to know. He raised his head and roared, "Damn it, this guy used the same trick again. When he saw us coming, he immediately teleported away." At the same time, he secretly sent a voice transmission to Shu Wuxia in the other direction, Taoist Shu, the Yin-Yang Eagle Eyes bloodline ability, which was activated just now, and I saw this guy. No. Yes. I am the target now, but the next one must be you. Once the 3 of us kill him, it will be useless even if all the other Taoists come together. But now he has been exposed. You and we can beat him at his own game and kill him in one fell swoop. After a few simple words of discussion, Jianghu and Shu Wuxia quickly decided on a plan to deal with Yi Xian. After discussing it with each other, they agreed on a time and a secret signal, but they didn't immediately gather together. After all, if the 2 of them gathered together, the little primordial demon ape would most likely not dare to get close to them because of fear. But now, they had already grasped the other party's traces without the other party knowing. It could be said that they had the upper hand, and victory was already in their hands. Now, what they needed to do was to attract the opponent to them and lure the snake out of its hole. Damn it! Did this guy escape to the depths of the hinterland? I can't find him anywhere. With a sneer in his heart, Jianghu led the primordial little demon ape, who was following behind him, to a small circle at the edge of the core hinterland. Along the way, he and Shu Wushuang, who was also searching, crossed each other from time to time, but they did not make a move. Because the primordial little demon ape was always in the void behind Xianxia, although the distance was not close, the two of them were not 100% sure that they could succeed. There was only one chance. If they failed, the opponent would know that their secret method of hiding their figure in qi was no longer effective, and they would not have a second chance. Therefore, Jin Haoxiao and Shu Wushuang were very cautious and cherished this one and only chance. The opportunity had finally come. In fact, Jin Haoxiao had been secretly observing the movement behind him. At this time, he was rushing in a direction, and the vague energy light mass behind him finally moved and slowly approached him. Jin Haoxiao was excited and immediately sent a sound transmission to Shu Wushuang. "My fellow cultivator, the fish has taken the bait and is approaching me. It is only 5,000 miles away. When it is close, my figure will slightly pause in the void. You can lock the position at once and directly teleport to it. Then, come and chop off its head." After a while, when the vague energy light mass was close to the void 2,000 miles away, Jin Haoxiao stopped and pretended to think about which direction to start the search next. At this moment, the energy light mass behind him suddenly accelerated and rushed behind him in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the eyelids of Jin Haoxiao's huge golden eagle real body twitched violently, and the blood vessels under the back of his head suddenly jumped a few times due to psychological effects. It was really Ji Jingfeng's extremely shrill scream and the horrible situation of the back of his head that had left a deep psychological shadow in his heart. The one rapidly approaching from behind was indeed Yi Xian in his three-headed six-armed demon ape real body. The distance of more than 2,000 miles in the void was almost instantaneous for him, whose cultivation was infinitely close to the universe realm. At this time, Yi Xian was about 1,000 feet behind Jin Haoxiao. Without saying anything, he turned his hand and took out the Shengnong pestle that had transformed into the big-headed black stick. However, at the same time, an anxious scream came out of Jin Haoxiao's mouth. Caught off guard, even Yi Xian, who hadn't appeared yet and hadn't taken out the big-headed black rod, was shocked. "Shu Wushuang, now is the time. Chop off his head." Whoosh! Shu Wushuang, who had already locked on the position of the void in advance, arrived at the sound and teleported there directly. The huge long-handled broadsword in his hand directly slashed at Yi Xian's position. "Yo, you saw through it?" Chapter 37-36. Among Yi Xian's spiritual power techniques, secret techniques, and divine abilities, the rest were all high level. Only the newly mutated slave seal was still at the elementary level. Apart from that, his spiritual lightning technique and spiritual reversal technique were still at the intermediate level. The former was only a spiritual power secret technique. The latter was a spiritual power divine ability. Therefore, even though spiritual reversal technique was only at the intermediate level, it was still a spiritual power divine ability. In addition, Yi Xian was now in his three-headed six-armed demon ape true form, and his cultivation was already at the half-step universe realm. When he used it now, its power was naturally extraordinary. However, it was not convenient for him to shout the words, "spiritual reversal technique," out loud. It would make others think of the demon tribe. After all, spiritual power was the unique label of the demon tribe. After activating the spirit core that was suspended above his sea of consciousness, a large amount of level 8 mental energy instantly leaked out. At the same time that he used the spirit reversal divine ability, Yi Xian also shouted in a bewildered manner, "Magic Saber Divine Ability." Gue Hai Yi Dao was originally the name of a demon scout major under his command. Now that this person was in Triumph City, Yi Xian shouted the name of the divine ability. On one hand, it was because of a flash of inspiration. On the other hand, it was because of the scene that was about to unfold. The name of the divine ability was too appropriate. Hum! A continuous and weak high-frequency trembling sound rang out. Yi Xian, who had just appeared with the true body of the devil ape, suddenly shot out 2 rays of bloodlight from the blood-colored eyes of his 3 true bodies without any warning. It went straight up and hit the long-hilted broadsword that was slashing towards his head. The 2 blood-red lights were like liquid. They instantly spread along the huge saber surface like a layer of blood-red dye rapidly spreading. In the next instant, a strange scene occurred. Shu Wushuang, who had been secretly delighted that he could cut off the head of the little primordial demon ape true form in the next instant, and even if he did not die on the spot, he would at least severely injure him. His entire body suddenly froze, and the light in his eyes became perplexed at this moment. Although it was only for a short moment, only half a breath of time, everything had changed. Originally, the enormous long blade was only half a meter away from Yi Xian's flesh and blood body when it was about to chop off the neck of Yi Xian's body. However, at this moment, as the layer of blood-colored brilliance that enveloped and spread over the blade flashed, the broad and sharp blade actually reversed in an instant. It followed the path of the slash and returned to the original path. When it reached the starting point, it did not stop and went straight for Xu Wushuang's neck. Pooh! With a muffled sound, Xu Wushuang's giant head was separated from its body and fell into the void. The moment his head fell, Xu Wushuang's eyes finally regained their clarity. There was a strong unwillingness and fear in his eyes. Unfortunately, it was too late. His eyes quickly dimmed and he died. Walala! In the headless neck cavity, a large amount of blood rushed into the sky, directly drenching Xianxia, who was in front of Xu Wushuang. This scene looked very strange. Xianxia also saw it. At this moment, he was scared out of his wits, and his whole mind was in a mess. In addition, before he could recover from the shock, a huge pillar of blood gushed out of Xu Wushuang's headless neck behind him, drenching his head and brain. The blood made him feel slightly hot all over. However, in the depths of his heart, there was an extremely strong chill that suddenly rushed up along his tailbone. In the blink of an eye, it reached the back of his head, making his scalp completely numb. In fact, it was good that he was numb. Because at this moment, the infamous big-headed black stick had already been summoned by the three-headed, six-armed immemorial little ape demon. After a furious roar, it directly smashed into the back of Xianxiao's head. This time, because the back of Xianxiao's head had already been raised by the bottom of his heart, the whole back of his head was numb, so he basically didn't feel much pain. He didn't even let out a scream. He directly rolled his eyes and fainted on the spot. Of course, the back of his head was numb, and he didn't feel any pain. However, the suspicious bulge that was as big as a small hill was still there. After knocking Xianxia unconscious with a single strike, Yi Xian didn't hesitate any longer and immediately put away the big-headed black stick. Then, with a wave of his hand, the transformed withered demon blood blade appeared. With a slash, it directly cut off a huge right wing from Xianxiao's 3,000-meter-long golden eagle true body. He just said that he would roast the void rat and cut off one of Xianxiao's chicken wings to roast. Then, Yi Xian turned his hand again, and the withered demon blood blade disappeared. Xianxia, who had cut off one of the Ji Qi's wings, was also directly put into the internal space of the Shennon cauldron in his body. Xianxia obviously wouldn't die just by cutting off one of the Ji Qi's wings, but Yi Xian wouldn't let him go. This guy actually dared to greet Yi Xian's mother. When this sentence came out, his ending was already determined. This headless body of the void rat is thousands of feet long. I can't eat it all by myself. Previously, I said that I would treat Porcupine and Hairy Turtle to eat the void rat's meat, so I'd better keep it and roast it later. Anyway, the void rat had already been beheaded, so it couldn't escape the final fate of being roasted and eaten. Yi Xian waved his hand as he spoke loudly, and directly put Xu Wushuang's headless body and huge head into the Shennon cauldron in the undying world in his body. Then, his gaze swept over to the Ji Qi's wings that had just been cut off from Xianxiao's golden eagle true body. Xianxia was a Taoist of the Golden Eagle tribe, a supreme expert of the universe. After manifesting the Golden Eagle true body, the Ji Qi's wings had reached thousands of feet in length. If a complete Ji Qi's wings were 3,000 feet long, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to finish it all by himself. The Ji Qi's wings that he had cut off in the void was only a small part of the right wing of the Golden Eagle true body. Even so, it was still thousands of feet long. After roasting it with the dual-colored flames in the Shennon cauldron and removing the impurities, it would be at least 60 to 70 feet long. Yi Xian definitely wouldn't be able to finish it all by himself. However, it didn't matter. He was prepared to roast it all in one go for the sake of swallowing a tube of level 13 liquid, and making the final preparations to break through to the 13th Great Realm, the Genesis Realm. Of the 60 to 70 feet of roasted chicken wings, he would at most consume 20 feet of them. The remaining 40 feet would be taken into Yi Xian's body and thrown directly into the Shennon cauldron. The purplish warbler, Duanmu Xiaocha, Zhao Qianru, and the 8 great guardian warriors were still inside, eagerly watching. Since the battle this time started when Lang Gongqiang was taken into the Shennon cauldron after being knocked unconscious, those fellows in the cauldron must have known that Yi Xian was causing trouble outside again. Chapter 37:37. Whoosh! With a wave of his hand, a Shen-Nong dual-colored flame was pulled out from the space within the Shen-Nong cauldron in Yi Xian's undying world. It directly enveloped the 300-meter-long eagle wing that lay in the space to the right. As soon as the dual-colored flame touched it, the golden wing was completely burned, revealing the wing meat inside, and then began to drip. It sounded very comfortable, but in the eyes of the hundreds of geniuses around, it was no different from a soul-stirring sound. This group of people trembled violently at the first moment, turned around and fled in all directions while trembling. Everything happened too fast. Except for Xianxia and Shu Wushuang, no one knew that they had actually set a trap, waiting for the little primordial demon ape to fall into it. Until the roar came from Xianxia's mouth, followed by Shu Wushuang's teleportation, and the long-handled broadsword was about to chop off the little primordial demon ape's neck. The hundreds of young prodigies who had followed behind the two of them, as well as Ji Jingfeng who had fled in all directions, suddenly came to a realization. At that moment, everyone's faces were full of surprise. Sure enough, they were worthy of being the Taoist of heaven and earth. With the two of them working together, they could easily chop off the little primordial demon ape. However, what happened next was so strange that everyone's eyes popped out. Shu Wushuang seemed to have gone crazy. He was the Taoist of heaven and earth of the Void Rat clan. At the most critical moment, when the broadsword in his hand was about to chop off the little primordial demon ape's neck, he dropped the chain at this moment and directly cut off his own neck with the broadsword. Then before everyone could react, Xianxia, who was drenched by the blood gushing out from the headless neck cavity of Shu Wushuang, was hit by the big-headed black stick on the back of his head, just like Lang Gongqiang and Ji Jingfeng before. His head swelled up like a mountain, and he fainted directly and was dragged away. This was too shocking. All of this was really hard to accept. If it was said that Lang Gongqiang and Ji Jingfeng were both ambushed by the small primordial demonic ape from behind, and that was why they were so pitiful. But now, Shu Wushuang and Xianxia had set a trap in advance to lure the little primordial demonic ape into their trap. Moreover, they had even succeeded. In just a moment, they would be able to cut off one of the 3 heads of the little primordial demonic ape, or at least severely injure it. However, the final result was completely the opposite. Shu Wushuang and Xianxia were killed and injured, while the little primordial demon ape, after receiving the captives and spoils of war, directly roasted chicken wings in front of everyone. What did this mean? It meant that everyone's previous understanding of this little primordial demon ape was wrong. He was merely at the grand perfection of the cosmic light stage 9th stage, yet he had already killed and captured 3 of the 4 Tao children of heaven and earth, as well as 7 or 8 weaker juniors from other races. This was definitely a fierce reputation, and no one dared to provoke it. At least the hundreds of young geniuses of the major forces who were still lingering at the edge of the hinterland absolutely did not have the guts to do so. Now, nearly 100 people were fleeing in all directions, their expressions changing drastically. They were simply like stray dogs. It was really because the little primordial demon ape was too ferocious. It was either directly chopping it off and roasting it, or smashing it on the back of its head. They did not dare to compete with the Taoist of heaven and earth. As for the cultivation realm and combat power, there was no need to compete. In the face of such a murderous god, was there any other choice except to escape? Unfortunately, even if the battlefield was only at the edge of the core hinterland of the source of all evil, it was still vast and boundless, spanning tens of millions of miles. The little primordial demon ape was guarding the only way to the buffer zone outside the central region, so these guys had no way to escape. Anyway, they did not dare to go deep into the core hinterland, where there were a large number of indigenous fierce beasts, including the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise, who were the old monsters of the region, were definitely more fierce than the little primordial demon ape. In desperation, the hundreds of young geniuses of the various clans could only wander around the edge of the core hinterland, trembling and extremely anxious. At this time, Yi Xian had already roasted the 1,000-feet-long golden eagle wing. After being burned by the Shen-Nong dual-colored flame, the eagle wing was now only about 70 feet long. Yi Xian waved his hand, and the black demon blade cut through, leaving about 20 feet long, and the remaining 50 feet were divided into 3 parts. One part was about 10 feet long, and he threw it into the internal space of the Shen-Nong cauldron, letting the 3 purplish warbler girls and the 8 great Vajras benefit from it. The other 2 parts were also about 20 feet long, and flew directly to the core hinterland in front of them. This was to show respect to the primordial porcupine and the primordial tortoise. Then, he turned his right hand, and the black demon blade was taken into his body. Then, he took out the big black stick, which was about 1,000 feet long, and dragged it behind him. Then, his left hand waved in the void, and the 20 feet long golden eagle wing flew up automatically and rushed in front of him. He held it in his left hand and bit it. Delicious! As expected of the eagle wing, it was much more delicious than the python meat. It was extremely tender, and it melted in his mouth. A wave of energy spread in his body, and some mysterious sounds of chains could be vaguely heard. This was the sign that the shackles of the human body's potential were being pulled by the essence of the flesh and blood, and were about to be torn apart. You can't escape. I have said before that this is the gambling battlefield. Either you don't come in, or you don't want to leave. Around the void in front of him, the hundreds of young geniuses of the various forces were all looking at him in horror, and there were many familiar faces among them. For example, Gong Wu Xian, Chou Do Fu, Wu Chenzi, and Yu Xianlong. There were also Zhao Batian, Peng Jingxiao, the two princes of the Heavenly Qin Kingdom and the Heavenly Battle Kingdom, Zhan Lingfeng, Su Biqing, and even Yi Xian's brother in name, the first prince of the Immortal Dynasty, Long Xiang, and so on. Seeing these guys, Yi Xian was even more delighted. At this moment he who had 3 heads and 6 arms, was holding a huge golden eagle wing that was 20 feet long in his left hand, which was made of flesh and blood. He was gnawing on it, while his other right hand was dragging a huge black club that was 1,000 feet long. As he ate, he walked step by step toward the hundreds of young geniuses of the various forces in the void in front of him. Don't struggle. It's useless. Why can't you obey me? At least, you can avoid being beaten by the black stick. This scene was too weird and too vulgar. At first glance, it was like a burly man holding a chicken drumstick in one hand and a huge mace in the other. He was gnawing on it while walking toward a group of defenseless girls with a lewd smile. And he was even smiling evilly. Don't resist. Obey me, or you will be beaten. Ah. Chapter 37-38. Bang! 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 The small primordial demon ape was not polite at all. Without saying a word, it directly teleported away, waving the big-headed black stick in its right hand again and again. Every time, it landed on the back of the heads of the young geniuses of the various factions. As for those human clan experts, who did not have a huge bloodline true body, their entire bodies were hit. Smashed. Of course, the cultivation of these guys was below him. Only a few of them were in the cosmic light realm, but they had not reached the 9th stage perfection of this realm. They were still weaker than Yi Xian and could not withstand his full strength. Therefore, Yi Xian controlled his strength and only smashed these guys into long bumps on their heads or directly vomited blood. Their lives were not in danger. The reason why Yi Xian was anxious to attack was that the 200-foot-long golden eagle wing in his left hand was now visible to the bone. The energy in Yi Xian's body was surging endlessly. If he had not tried his best to suppress it, the countless pores on his body would have spewed out thousands of rays of light at this moment. In this realm, he had reached the peak and had to break through. However, there was still an extremely thick shackle of the physical body and blood in his body that had not been torn apart. The majestic blood and blood flow was not smooth, and all the obstacles made him very uncomfortable, as if there was a choke in his throat. Now, Yi Xian only wanted to take a tube of 13-level liquid as soon as possible, tear the potential shackles, and break through in one fell swoop. From then on, he would enter a new realm. Therefore, before that, he had to smash all the young geniuses of the various factions and take them into his body. At this time, as the giant eagle wing in his left hand was gnawed away, the 3-headed, 6-armed primordial demon ape swung the big-headed black stick in its right hand and smashed it down. In the blink of an eye, more than 40 people were knocked out and directly fainted on the spot. Then, Yi Xian took all of them into the Shunnong cauldron in his body. There were only about 40 young geniuses of the various factions left outside, all of whom were acquaintances of Yi Xian. At this moment, they were all trembling in fear and repeatedly begging for mercy. In the face of such a ferocious lord, coupled with the fact that there was no way to escape, they had no choice but to beg for mercy. Little demonic ape, do you know who I am? I am Long Xiang, the first prince of the Immortal Dynasty, the future immortal emperor. You dare to use the black stick. I will fight with you. Perhaps he felt that blindly begging for mercy might be useless. This immemorial demonic ape was too ferocious, so he had to come up with something to make it fear him. As a result, when the first prince of the imperial dynasty, Long Xiang, steeled his heart and clenched his teeth as he announced his name when he saw Yi Xian approaching with the big head black rod in his right hand. After all, the Immortal Dynasty was one of the two major factions of the human race, and the human race could be said to be the dominant faction in the Wanluo Federation. Only when all the major races of the Second Universe joined forces could they contend with the human race's cultivation and technology factions. From this perspective, the universe Dao child of any race in the Second or First Universe could not compare to the first prince of the everlasting dynasty, no matter how great his background was. Long Xiang was quite confident in this point. In fact, after hearing Long Xiang's words, the three-headed six-armed primordial demon ape was stunned for a moment, and its body suddenly stopped in mid-air, and the expressions on its three heads also became strange. Zhan Lingfeng and Su Biqing, the two crown princes of the Heavenly Chen Kingdom and the Heavenly Battle Kingdom, saw this scene. They were also stunned for a moment, then overjoyed. It seems that the Immortal Dynasty is quite famous. Since that was the case, in order to avoid being tortured by the big-headed black stick, he had no choice but to follow behind the first prince and get a free ride. Thinking like this, the two guys immediately jumped out with flushed faces. They patted their chests and spoke with certainty. Their tone was incomparably firm, and their expressions were extremely confident. And me. I am Su Biqing, the crown prince of the Heavenly Chen Kingdom, the first prince's trusted aide. As for me, I am Zhan Lingfeng, the crown prince of the Heavenly Battle Kingdom. Speaking of the first prince's most trusted aide, I am naturally ranked above Su Biqing. Fellow Taoist, this prince advises you not to be impulsive. Just as Zhan Lingfeng and Su Biqing finished howling, the first prince, Long Xiang, reached out his hand and pushed the two of them to the side. He walked to the front and tried to persuade Yi Xian with a pretentious expression. In the current world, in the Three Great Plains, the Heaven's legacy race has been defeated and fled. The myriad Luo Federation is the dominant force, and in the Federation, it belongs to the human clan. In the human clan, the Immortal Dynasty is one of the two camps. This prince, as the future immortal emperor. Bang! 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 Without waiting for him to finish speaking, the little primordial demon ape had already lifted the big-headed black club behind it. With a swing of its right hand, it pointed at Long Xiang, Zhan Lingfeng, and Su Biqing's heads one by one. Pooh! The three of them spat out blood on the spot, and 70 to 80% of their bones were broken. This was the result of Yi Xian controlling his strength. Otherwise, with one hit from the black stick, they would have exploded into a bloody mist and died completely. Even so, under Yi Xian's mercy, the three of them were still heavily injured on the spot. Although they didn't faint, their eyes were confused and they couldn't find a focus at all. This was because their minds were rumbling, and their eyes were filled with signs of gold bursting out. They were stunned by a single hit from the stick. With a wave of his hand, Yi Xian put away Long Xiang and the others, and then turned to look at Gong Wuxin and the others, including the little princess of the colored python clan, Medusa, who was also one of them. Now, there were only a little over 40 people left outside who had not been hit by his black stick. All of them were extremely frightened, and felt that this little devil in front of them was simply stubborn, and no matter what they said, he would not listen to them. For a time, no one dared to make a sound. Little brother, I am a woman, can you not be so fierce? You scared me so much that my heart is beating wildly. In the end, the little princess of the colored python clan, Medusa, removed her bloodline true body state and returned to her human form. She looked like a delicate little girl, and at this time, a pair of big watery eyes were fixed on Yi Xian, and her expression was lovely and pitiful. This little girl had no other choice, and was afraid that she would also be hit by Yi Xian's black stick. If that happened, her head would be swollen or a horn would grow. Not only would it be painful, but it would also be very ugly. However, this little devil ape in front of her was stubborn, so she had no choice but to try a honey trap. Perhaps it would work. Bang! Monster, you were a big snake just now, and now you have become a little girl who is bewitching everyone. You deserve to be beaten. Just as Medusa finished speaking, a 300-meter-long big-head black rod landed on her head, smashing her into the air on the spot. Although there weren't any bags on her head, nor were there any broken bones or tendons, she rolled her eyes and was directly taken away by Yi Xian. Oh my god, that's too cruel.